All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of Everything is Political. I'm your host, Tim, with Lost in Law. Joining me today is my guest, Crumbrion, also known as Cress. Say hello.
Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Oh, there's probably a YouTube delay on that one. Man, I never get that delay down correctly.
Dun, dun,
Anyways,
dun.
it's always startling when I hear my own voice in my head. I'm like, look, there's 500 alters in my head, and their voices I hear all the time. When I hear my own voice, the host voice, that's what scares me.
Hey, at least you know it's working now. So
Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, let's go into a little bit of background. I want to make sure I give my guest a chance to introduce themselves in their own
shoot.
words. So, Grum, go ahead. Tell everyone what you're all about.
Well, I mean, I'm for those of you who don't know me, I'm a bit of an enigma. but I've had a lot of interesting stuff happen, but mostly like right now, I work full time. I work at Costco. I'm not ashamed to admit that. It's a great place. Um, as a full time job, and then my part time hobbies. I'm a VTuber, Twitch streamer, and part time YouTuber. I haven't been on YouTube in a minute. This is my grand return to YouTube in some time. So, but yeah, I've been all over the place, all over the spectrum, so to speak. Ran conventions. I've done a lot of whatchamacallit, activism for back in the day for LGB rights and stuff like that. So I've kind of touched a little bit of everything as it goes along. But we're here to talk about politics today. So
Oh, are we ever? And I'm a frequent guest of your Twitch streams too. You're always entertaining. You have that personality about you that means I don't even care what game you're playing. It's always entertaining.
thank you. I try to. It takes a long time to get there. Like when you're talking to nobody and you're just you have no one responding and just trying to be entertaining with whatever you're doing or just be informative with whatever you're doing because I'm definitely not good at the game, so I got to be good somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, MLB the Show. Well, actually, in the I was the origin
Oh,
of the librarian Crumb meme.
yes, you were.
Um,
The
oh,
2K,
that's an old reference too. That goes a
WWE
couple years
2K.
back.
It does. Yeah, it
But
was a good one.
anyways, um, no, I've enjoyed your content. You on your Twitch streams, you hold yourself out as a transgender individual.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
you've certainly not been shy about any of your political beliefs or your, I guess, your group identities. But I do kind of want to start a little bit at the beginning, so to speak, in your life,
Yeah.
and how you sort of just show that up there. How you sort of developed your own personal moral beliefs.
Well, it's such an odd thing because like these types of things usually from like a psychological perspective ingrained early when you're young, right? It's like when you're like 0 to 5 years is usually when you're developing all that type of stuff. But I would put it back to my family dynamic, right? So my family, I had two older sisters. My parents were together right up until I was about 13 years old before they divorced. So like I did have the nuclear family kind of life. We had own houses. We had you know done regular family stuff the whole time. So I'd always been exposed, I guess, to as my family was more so liberal leaning in terms of political. So I was always exposed more to the liberal side of politics and the I lived through the Jean Chrétien era, the Brian Mulroney era, all that sort of stuff. So very interesting politics to grow up in. And so like when I'm taking in all of that stuff as I'm growing up, right? Those are the things that I see in the news. Those are the things that I see in the headlines and my family talking around the dinner table about these types of things. So, like in an interesting part too, because even though my family was very liberal in terms of how they voted and stuff like that, there what I grew up in a smaller town, so I was born in the Toronto area. So I was from Toronto, and we moved early on when I was very young to a smaller town. Just at that point, it was a small town. I moved to Barrie a few years after that. So growing up in a small town that you don't realize is a small town until you move out of it, there was a lot of racist undertones, like, and a lot of like racism that was general xenophobia, I would suppose, because we moved from Toronto to a very strictly conservative, historically conservative town, and where people were very conservative on what they had around them because there was not many families of color.
Now, to clarify, there's not many African Canadians in, well, especially in that region.
Yeah.
Most, would I be correct in saying that most of the xenophobia is directed to the First Nations in the area?
There was a lot of that, yes, because there was, I believe that there were some reservations not too far away,
Yeah.
notably around Casino Rama, because that was a
One
big
of the
thing.
most one of the most famous Indian casinos, possibly in North America.
Yes,
Casino
yeah,
Rama's been around a very long time. Yeah, and it's been memed on quite a few times too.
yes, exactly. But I remember Casino Rama being a big thing. There was a lot of detracting towards Native Americans, or Native Canadians, First Nations, stuff like that. So, and looking back at it, it's like we did not have very many people of color that were living there. So for Black and Asian, there was not a very high population. Anytime that there was, it was a very out of place thing. And so even more so, like when I was growing up, there were some very open transsexual individuals in the community that were treated like freaks of nature and stuff like that too. It was a very interesting place. And growing up in that town, there was a very strong push against the LGBT community, so much so when I was growing up in high school, there was a kid that was rumored to be gay, like not even confirmed or not even come out and admitted that he was gay, just on the rumor that he was gay. And there was kids that gang beat him in front of the high school, just on the rumor of it. And that was
Oh, yeah.
back, I think, in like 1993, 1994. So it was a very different place to grow up in. And so viewing all of that stuff, and like I don't know like at what point I realized that this is wrong or that this is not the way to approach things, but this really gave me a framework of how I'm going to approach my life. But I do want to say I think one of the people that because growing up I had a very tumultuous relationship with my father. I didn't really have a father figure in my life because my dad was a long haul truck driver, so he was working 16 to 18-hour days. Didn't see him much. When I did see him, he was drinking all the time, so he was not a very pleasant person to be around during that time. And he was doing what he could to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads. So live and learn and understand. But I didn't really have a father figure until I started going to college and got a job at the local video store. And the owner of that store, he didn't have kids, and he never wanted to have kids. He looked at his employees as his kids, and so he kind of took that father figure role for me. In the short time that I spent there, I learned a lot of how to operate as a human being, right? And so he was a business owner, and he himself was conservative, although like not staunch hardline conservative, but he himself was conservative. So I think a mixture of the different and the perfect storm of an atmosphere of where I grew up kind of built who I am today. That was a long answer to a very short question, but
Oh, no worries. No, definitely, because it needs proper context. You know, it's funny. Of course, I'm a law student. I actually last week finished a like a practical criminal trial where I had to do everything from start to finish: prelim motions,
mm,
opening, cross examination of the crown, examination in chief of my defense, and then my closing state. Like from start to finish, the whole trial. Um, and then actually today I had to meet with the prof for the post trial feedback. But one of where was I going with that? Ah, oh no, I know where I was going with that. One of the things they tell you is sometimes you see in the U.S. trials someone will when you cross a witness, they're hostile to you, so you're allowed to like lead their answers, right?
oh,
You're allowed to go in and say, hey, this thing was this, right? Or was it not that? Or, right, you're allowed to lead them and
yeah,
give them the answer. They have to agree or disagree with it. in the US, sometimes you can just kind of force the witness to go yes or no and not really elaborate on that. In Canada, the judges don't let you do that. So if the witness wants to say yes or no, but you can't cut them off.
Oh,
And I think
interesting.
that's very relevant here because it was a short question, but a longer answer gives you everyone the appropriate context because otherwise they'll have questions after like, okay, so what do you mean by my first question was you said a video store. Is that like a Blockbuster kind of thing?
It was actually in an independent one. It was Bandito Video. It was bigger than it was like 3 times as big as the Blockbuster down the road, and
Okay.
it literally had like tons of video. It had VHS, DVD. It had all sorts of stuff. It was great. It was very unique video store. Small family business, just ran by the owners, where it was like the husband and wife team, and they had like 5 employees. It was great. It was popping every day. So
It just dates you, right? Like you
it
have to
does.
understand, like with our age, what we are now, um, when we make any reference to the VHS and the game, video store rental era, we suddenly realize there are people who are legally adults right now who have no idea what we're talking about.
And that's the sad part, because they're missing out on so many good things, like so many good like movies and
Yeah,
like just great
because they're not on.
experiences of.
Well, Canadian Netflix has always been terrible. I imagine the American Netflix experience was a little bit better. Um, the because none of the movies I grew up with, I grew up with a pretty specific set of movies. I was a big fan of the Don Bluth films, who was
Mhm.
competing against Disney in the 90s, well 80s, 90s, I think. I think he went out of Don Bluth Studios went out of business in the mid 90s, but he turned out some excellent level films. And the Spielberg Land Before Time.
Oh, yeah.
It's yeah. They became much more childish after that. The Land Before Time series. They tried a reboot recently, and it just looks so bad.
Oh,
I'm like, I
no.
grew up on those movies, and the reboot looked so bad.
Oh,
But
no.
I remember the very first one of that series was directed by Steven Spielberg, and then he left the series,
It
and
was
that's when they
phenomenal,
that film taught me about the concept of death for the first time.
right? It was just real. It was intense.
Nowadays there is a good movie for kids if you ever want to uh have a conversation about death. Puss in Boots,
Okay.
the Last Wish, I think is what it's called. The one that came out, I think maybe last year or maybe the year
The
before
newer
that.
one, yeah.
Yeah. Um, where Puss has to confront the prospect of death. Like the whole gimmick is that he's on his ninth life,
Oh.
and so he has to confront the prospect of actually dying instead of living his carefree kind of lifestyle. And I felt that it has an excellent kind of you can't be afraid of death message for younger people. I wouldn't say like toddler age kids, that would be like more preteen age kids that'd be able to look at that message and take something from it. But
That's very
um
cool.
we're we're definitely off track on this. But that's how the show goes. That's
Hey,
me.
there
If
it
you've
goes.
ever seen me stream before, I go off track. But
No worries.
let's just get back a little bit on
Yeah.
track. So you talked to sort of how you developed into your adulthood these what you hold to be true today. So let's ask the next obvious question: what do you hold to be true? Have you ever applied a political label to yourself in terms of which party you align with or vote with? Have you ever and yeah, I won't compound that question. We'll start there and then um
Sure.
we'll
Sure.
go into the your experience within the trans community after that.
So I think that with not being taught the differences between political beliefs and the political parties in school, it's a very difficult it's a very difficult thing to ask and quantify, because I fell disillusion, like I fell to the illusion that the Liberal Party actually stood for a bunch of things that they claimed to, and then didn't actually. That's a very big like OMG moment when you're growing up and you see all of this stuff happening, and it's like, okay, well, this just makes sense. Like, why, like these all these things, and you don't realize that the politicians just lie. Like,
Mhm.
you can have liberal beliefs, you can have conservative beliefs, you can have blah blah blah, But the difference is the political parties don't necessarily represent those beliefs either.
And the
And
most
so,
recent example, and I've heard you talk about this before, was when Justin Trudeau promised electoral reform
yes.
and completely reneged on that promise. I heard a rumbling that maybe Jagmeet Singh was going to like bring it up in the supply and confidence agreement, but he got the national pharmacare, so that's out the window.
Yeah,
He
it's
got
out
what he
the window.
wanted, so he's not really going to press the issue on the things he doesn't want.
It would only benefit him, in my opinion. But that's besides the point. The whole thing is, it's like, yeah, I was in the boat for liberals. I was voting liberal year over year, right up until Justin Trudeau said, I'm going to bring in electoral reform. We're going to make sure that 30% of the population is not speaking for 100% of the population. Blah 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 blah. We're going to do this right, and he just didn't do it.
Yeah,
And since then, I have not voted for a single liberal candidate since. Is it,
no. Have you found a political home, or do you just sort of kind of take it every election? I'm going to look at the candidates and what they're saying.
I generally take a look at the candidates now and see what they're doing, but I'm actually getting more on board with the idea of voting for independence. And I
Mhm.
know it's a silly idea for a large amount of the population. However, I will say that so we in my area right now, we voted in a green candidate. So basically an independent, because he's the only one in the federal caucus right now or whatever. So they might have two. I might have
Yeah,
lied about that.
Elizabeth May
They
is
might
still
have
in.
two. Okay, and she's still there.
Yeah,
So basically we got our independent in, and he has just single-handedly pushed through and gotten, like, I think at least 4 or 5 different things. Either pushed through as like he made motions and all this other stuff. I have to look exactly what they are, but he actually has made an impact in Canadian politics, in like federal government politics, namely around the international students, um, basically taking over. And he pushed the Canadian government. He was the one that tabled a motion to get the one of the ministers to look at and either cap the amount of students that were coming over, or like increase the requirements for their financial and all that stuff. That was based on what he put forward. And so, like, it's, as much as I'm on board for like being like, yeah, yeah, party, the difference that I've noticed between being a member of a party caucus and being a member that you don't have as much, representation, is that for example, the Green Party, they're just happy to get someone in the seat. They
hmm
they they have their party beliefs, but from what I understand from speaking to the party representatives, the Green Party doesn't impose their own will on their members. They say you
right.
can vote for it the way you want to, you can put forward the things you want to, blah blah blah. And so that allows the person in there. So like right now, for our representative, it's Mike Morris. So Mike Morris can go to his constituents and be like, "What do you want me to bring up? What is pressing for you? What is on your doorstep? I will speak to that in Parliament." And so far he's done it. Like, so he is like the only politician that I've seen since like Jack Layton to actually listen to the people and actually do what he says he's going to do.
I'm glad you mentioned Jack Layton because I was just going to say the NDP used to be that before they started getting
Yeah,
the sniff of power.
exactly.
Jack Layton was the height of that party. Um, but in terms of the success of their agenda, the supply and confidence deal with the Liberals has been most productive in terms of pushing their priorities. But I would say, like electorally, they were the most successful under Jack Layton. But that was another politician who, when the NDP never had the possibility of being in control of the levers of power. And so it's really easy to say, well, I'll just let everyone vote with their conscience. Now that we're seeing that they actually make up the supply and confidence agreement, Jagmeet Singh keeps a much tighter lid on how they vote.
Well, and that's the problem, right? Because you're sacrificing what got you there to try and hold on to it. And
hmm
that's not what we need as a country right now. We need people to be heard. We need areas to be represented. We need people, like the people's opinion, to be put first. We don't need to be sitting here propping up nonsense and having pandering to fringe crowds and all this other stuff. It's like that doesn't help us. That doesn't help us at all. I mean, like right now, we're Kitchener Waterloo is a laughing stock right now and one of the black eyes of Ontario because we have Conestoga College, who has imported an entire city of international students over here because they can just charge whatever they want for international students. And thanks to Doug Ford because he's putting a cap on what they can charge domestic students, but as uncapped what they can charge internationals. So of course the business side of Conestoga College is like, well, dollar signs. We're just going to promise everybody over in India that they can come over here and they're going to have great lives. And then when they're here, we're going to give them toilet paper diplomas and they can just work full time and we won't punish them for it.
Yeah.
Like
For context to the non-Ontario crowd, Conestoga College is like the community college level. It's not it's certainly not one of the larger, more famous post-secondary educational institutions.
mhm,
And Kitchener Waterloo Cambridge is a urban area about an hour and a half west of the Greater Toronto area. About 300,000 people altogether.
yeah,
But it's a very like college student town. You know what? It's very similar to Madison, Wisconsin. If you guys are familiar with Madison, it's your quintessential college town because obviously the biggest institution there is the University of Waterloo, which is one of Canada's premier engineering universities.
yeah.
They also have Wilfrid Laurier, I believe, is another like
Wilfrid
kind of
Laurier
liberal arts.
University. Yeah.
Yeah, liberal arts college, and then Conestoga obviously is the community college level. Um, I don't know because it's not a polytechnical, is it?
No.
No, okay.
They're literally giving people business degrees and associates degrees. That's it.
So it's like the University of Phoenix.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
uh,
And
it-
to give context, so Kitchener, I think, has a population or had a population of 110, 120,000. Conestoga College last year alone admitted 30,000 students.
yeah. And so, of course, you're having a major housing issue right now.
Yes.
And the urban area that comprises Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, once you get outside of that urban development zone, like the Waterloo region, there's not much options. There's not like a satellite of bedroom communities all around. I mean, the largest is possibly St. Jacobs, which
Yeah,
is what, a
St.
village of
Jacobs is
400
probably one
people.
of the larger ones. Baden is nearby. That's
Hmm.
a little bit out of the way, but that's probably the biggest. And we have
Yeah.
St. Agatha, which is another like little Mennonite town. It's just there's a
Yeah.
lot of little tiny towns, Elmira, little tiny towns all around, but
And
nothing that
Elmira's
would be
what a half. Oh, Guelph. You got Guelph within a half
Guelph
hour.
is nearby. Yeah.
Yeah.
Guelph is probably the
Um,
closest bigger city.
yeah, and that's still quite a drive. Like that's not a commute you'd want to do every day.
No,
Um,
exactly.
so in terms of housing availability, when you import 1/3 of your city's population every year, um,
And that's
I'm
just the
guessing
students.
rent. Yeah, I'm guessing rent went up real high.
Oh, it's rent is outrageous. Rent is has spiked through the roof. You can't get a one bedroom apartment here for less than 2,000 a month.
Oh, that's right.
Lucky is
I could
that.
get a one bedroom in Calgary for less than 2,000. Calgary is well over 1 million people,
Yeah. Oh, and it's terrible here. It's terrible here right now. And the
and
problem
oh,
is
go ahead, go ahead.
we have a lot of businesses, especially like and investment companies that are purchasing up properties because land speculation, and
Mhm.
they're flipping zoning requirements so that they can turn around and sell it again, demolish properties, build expensive condos that don't have rent control, and fill it with people that can't afford it.
No.
It's
And then get
unsustainable.
bailed out when they go belly under or belly up, I
Exactly.
guess is the yeah. Get
Exactly.
bailed out. Yeah, that's there's been a passing. The American audience might be familiar with the idea of BlackRock buying up a lot of rural properties in the United States. I don't know if BlackRock is here in Canada, but there's absolutely the same issue. Vancouver has seen the worst of it.
Mhm.
Vancouver's legendary for how you can get a broom closet for $1,600 a month.
Yep.
It's legendary for how bad the rent is in Vancouver, and most of it's driven by foreign investors coming out of China, and Hong Kong especially.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not
Happens a lot.
just like Chinese Communist Party people. It's literally just there's too much money and not enough supply.
Yeah. Well, I just read an article recently about some owner in or some business owner in Toronto that started up a new business model, quote unquote, of just basically booting everybody out of a building and renting out every single room in the apartment to a person. So if it's a 3-bedroom apartment, they rent out the 3 rooms and the living room,
Hmm.
and
Oh,
$1,200 a month for each.
I experienced something like that in Fort McMurray. Now,
Oh,
Fort
baby.
McMurray is a unique city in Canada. It is the home, the heart of the Canadian oil patch in Alberta.
Hmm.
Um, and the oil boom, especially through the housing crisis when oil was doing well over $100 US a barrel. Um, it so many people were investing so much money and hiring so many people that a city that's normally 75,000 in population suddenly had something like 50,000 oil workers
Oh,
just
good
show
lord.
up. And so, and they didn't have zoning issues because if you know where Fort McMurray is, it's like really far up north in
Hmm.
Alberta. It's
Hmm.
lots of space, lots of land. They never had any issues with zoning. They literally just could not build them fast enough.
Oh, I
And
believe
then,
that.
like, I think what maybe a fifth or a sixth of the city burnt down in that huge forest fire. A couple, the neighborhood I used to live in was in that
Yeah.
fire,
Oh, geez.
but thankfully everyone made it out.
That's good.
Everyone was able to evacuate. You know, Brian Jean really made a name for himself during that, and only that. But it's funny because his neighborhood was affected by the fire, but his house survived. It was in a good location,
Oh my
but
goodness.
then it got flooded 2 years after.
Just can't escape it.
Nope. So like yeah, I don't think it burnt down, but there was damage. There was absolutely damage done to it.
Hmm.
So then he fixes it up, and then it gets flooded out a
Oh
few
my
years after
goodness.
that. So the guy couldn't catch a break. But just an interesting little Canadian trivia for you. Um, but yeah, I experienced that in Fort McMurray. But there was absolutely like there was a market reason why rent was out of control, and people were like sectioning basements into these.
Yeah.
You ever seen like the hospital on Mash where they set up like bed sheets in between the beds?
Oh yeah, and that's what they've been doing in these apartments too.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's outrageous. It's out of fucking control.
But
And
see, in KW, it's not driven by the market. It's
no.
this artificial cap on supply, government intervention, favoring the investment side and not the tenant side. Because if it was deregulated, the tenants would all just say, "Well, screw you. We're not going to rent from you at that price."
Well, and that's the whole point. And right now that's the struggle I'm having with City Hall. Because our City Hall, so the region of Waterloo is screwed up. Okay, I'll tell you right now. So we have the Tri-Cities, we have Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo that each have their own city council.
Yeah.
Now on top of that, there is a regional council. It's like another layer of government before the other governments. And so
Some Americans might be familiar with this, especially in those larger metropolitan areas where there's like these incorporated cities around. Like, so I'll use Minneapolis as the example, but then there's all these other cities and counties that satellite around it, right? Minneapolis, St. Paul. You go south into like the what's it called? I forget the name, but Dakota County, right? And then out where, Nick lives quite far from Minneapolis itself. But if you get
mhm,
out across the county line, you then have to deal with that county's board.
yeah,
So, yeah, like sometimes to get things permitted, you have to go to both the county and the incorporated city.
yeah. And so we're locked in a fight right now because my home is threatening to be demolished by the owner who's a complete piece of work. Foreign owner, lovely individual. Sarcasm dripping on that sentence, but it basically our city, is dragging its heels on making a bylaw that Hamilton recently adapted. Hamilton made a renoviction bylaw where it forces the owners of buildings, landlords, to register as landlords. And then if they're going to renovate, then they have to purchase a license to renovate. They have to give a valid reason as to why they're renovating. They have to house the person that they're displacing while the renovations are taking place, and then give the unit back at the same rental price after it's finished. And if they don't do any of those things, there's a $500 fine a day until they rectify it. So that's Hamilton's bylaw. Our city is just like London did something similar. Toronto is doing something similar. Our city is just like, no, we're dragging our heels about it because they're so worried about it pushing investors away. And it's like, good grief, come on. Like, come on.
Well, they want the money. Like, money talks
They
in
want money.
politics.
They want money. And they don't
And
care.
it's funny too because Ford got criticized on both sides of the aisle for this. The Green Belt is a huge political issue in Toronto.
Goof.
The way he went about it is how he's getting burned on it to this day. But I
Absolutely.
don't disagree with the goal, the aim. Toronto's rent prices have skyrocketed because of a lack of supply for the most part.
Yes.
The Greenbelt was you got to. I don't remember how many acres the Greenbelt is, but it is a very absurd number for such a large area like the city of Toronto, which houses 4 million people. It's by American standards, it's still a big city.
It really is.
And they put this cap. They designated this area a ring around the city as not being able to develop in that zone. And I think it's something like almost 60 kilometers in width, a belt that surrounds the city. Now, the city of Toronto is built up against Lake Ontario, so it's got a natural barrier on that south side, so you can only expand to the north, west, and east. The green belt surrounded, east, north, and west. So they basically said, don't build the city past this limit. And so what do you do when you can't build the city out? You build it up. And that's where these massive high-rise projects are coming in right in downtown Toronto. They have not updated the infrastructure in any way. The Gardiner Expressway is something like, 60 years old now?
Oh, yeah. It's still falling apart every single day.
And they haven't widened it in 60 years.
Yeah.
So imagine how many more people Toronto has had in 60 years move in, and they still got the same highways.
So many.
And the Greenbelt was so Ford gets elected, right? And he's promising to rescind the status of the Greenbelt and allow people to build houses there because they need the supply.
Which,
more than anything else, they need that supply.
In theory. It's a smart idea in theory because he was going to designate other land as Greenbelt in replacement.
Right. The idea that there still will be parks, and they were still going to do the because the Greenbelt's well developed for like pathways and trails, and so the original proposition that he had put forward was that they were going to preserve those.
Exactly.
Now I think the way that they design communities now, it's up to the developer to put in these like inter-community pathways. I'm not entirely sure how that process goes, and I don't know how much the city is involved in that process, but given how fast they put these communities up, that it can be like 5 to 10 years before those pathways become usable again.
Exactly. Well, the big thing that was the black eye for him on that one was that he had friends who were developers, and he cut them a deal, and he gave them rights to the Greenbelt land so that they could build on it for the purposes of building homes. And
allegedly,
they instantly, before as soon as they let go of his hand for the handshake, they instantly turned around and sold the land.
Yep. And now and so Calgary's got a thing too. Like Calgary's got a huge urban sprawl problem because we don't have a green belt. I mean, look, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Calgary is starting to eat up the cities around it, and they don't like that. I don't know what the politics really is, but the cities that are outside of the big major city don't like getting amalgamated. Now, Toronto's amalgamation, I believe, was forced. So,
it was.
That was but that was a long time ago. That's not anything that happened recently.
So, I just wanted to address Jacob in the chat really quickly because this actually pertains to our pre-game banter a little bit here about why do we need regulation for housing? Because without it, people are running rampant. Like it's literally, we need it because people can't do the right thing,
Yeah.
because we have developers coming in, their investment organizations, like investment companies, they don't have their own capital. They're buying property with other people's money, and then they're using that speculation to try and drive up profit and then flip and turn and sell it to people. And that there is a wild west going on right now in terms of housing, which is leaving a lot of people homeless right now, because in Kitchener, Waterloo specifically, and this goes right across Canada, but I can speak to it in KW right now. What's happening right now is that they get their hands on the property and they sit on it. They don't rent it out. They sit in the census as being owned and lived in. The buildings are empty. There's no one living in them. And when they demolish buildings, and for the purposes of building these high-rise towers and these grand, 90,000 unit places, they sit there for 7 years and haven't been touched. The dirt hasn't been turned over yet. There is no regulation right now that is forcing any developer to actually build anything at all. It's just the regulations that Doug Ford put in have made it so that they have a promise to build, and they get all of this land and all of this property if they promise to build something.
And many of these smaller investment firms, we had something similar to the PPP loans that the U.S. brought in.
Yeah,
We had this like the small business loans that the government brought in. They benefit from access to that capital that the common person trying to buy a house cannot get their hands on.
exactly.
So, like Jacob knows that there is very few people on this planet who are more conservative than I am, and even I look at the housing market and I just go, I mean, look, I'm the last person to advocate for a regulation. I just don't see another solution, because letting the free market decide it has the free market has given advantages to people who do not earn them, and the influx of foreign money has priced out Canadian money. We're always at the whim of the U.S. too, because the U.S. has more. The U.S. purchasing power is much higher than
Mhm.
the average Canadian
Exactly.
family. So on 1/3 of the income in the States, you could afford the same house in Canada.
Which it's
And yes,
insane.
and that's
Yeah.
just the Americans, right? That's not even considering the billionaires from China, India. There's quite a few Saudis that come to Canada.
Mhm.
Um, right. And again, they're because they can price out the native born Canadian, but they don't have to pay the native born Canadians welfare, social
Right.
assistance, homeless shelters, right?
Right.
They're not the ones who are affected by the negative. They just get all the positive consequences.
And they can afford to sit on 3 or 4 empty properties, because they're just sitting and waiting for the time that they can turn around and either sell it or, price gouge for whatever price they want to. I mean, look at BC right now, is happening in BC. They're just pulling the rug off. They're just pulling the cover off of something that's going on over there. There is affordable housing that was given to a number of individuals. I don't remember how many households it was or whatever else. Something like 30 or 50 or something random. But they found out that the people that got the affordable housing were not actually eligible for it. They were
Yeah.
making way too much money to be able to have those units.
And a number of people who run like small businesses out of those. Look,
Exactly.
even I don't ever want to give Justin Trudeau credit for saying anything that's actually true, but he wasn't lying when he made that comment about how a lot of small businesses are used to dodge taxes and to hide income.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's not wrong on that one. I think I wouldn't want to put a percentage onto it. I don't have enough data to make a confident assessment there. I think I would disagree with his characterization that most businesses do that, just because the number of small businesses in Canada is almost equal to the population in Canada. It's kind of ridiculous.
Mhm.
Um, but the number of people who run businesses that don't declare income out of these affordable housing units, you can. Some people are very transparent. Go on Google Maps, go into the nearest housing projects in your area, and look at where they list their business address. Right, someone's
Yeah.
manicures, nails, tutoring, all of the like in care or in home businesses. Hair. I've
Exactly.
seen a hairdresser operate out of a townhouse.
Yep. It's
So,
ridiculous. And so, like, again, why do we need these regulations? Because people take advantage of it, and they take advantage of it to an extreme. Like,
and
there's nothing wrong with like doing a little bit of stretching. Okay, maybe you want to get one up on the man. That's fine. That's like I'm for free market too. But when it gets to this extreme, where only 1% of the population is benefiting from it, and not even your population, like international population is
yeah,
benefiting.
and the benefit, let's be pretty clear here that the benefit was also caused by the government's policies. And right, if the government was
Exactly.
hands off to begin with, then possibly we wouldn't be here. I know the conservative slant on this issue is to always look at immigration, right? Legal immigration, illegal immigration, refugees, and international students, and point to that as one of the sources of the problems. And they're not wrong. It is one of the sources of the problems.
Hmm. Hmm.
The other thing would have been the unfair advantage that venture capitalists get through speculative marketing. It's
Yes.
not an area I can speak very authoritatively on, but we certainly are aware that when you have someone else's money to invest and very little downside, well, and bailouts we saw in 2008, the 2008 housing crisis, which
Hmm.
was done by Stephen Harper, by the way, one of the, a conservative majority government.
Yep.
Let's not, we're not going to hide that one. Reagan was just as guilty for some of his Fed regulations too. Um, these politicians we hold as conservative stalwarts, they're not perfect, and these are some of the more bigger errors they've made. Is flooding these markets with money that was not earned, the completely
That's a
unearned
huge issue.
money.
Yeah.
And then you go and artificially cap the supply with environmental regulations and ridiculous zoning requirements.
On top of everything else, and then we had COVID, and now we're seeing the long term, like medium term effects of the CEB benefit, like the CEB.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, or CERB. CERB, is that what you're?
it was CERB, but then they changed it to CEB or something like that. Stupid.
Oh, CRB. Yeah, Canada Recovery Benefit.
Yeah.
Again, money that was wholly unearned flooding in, and suddenly the price of a cheeseburger went up to $20.
With no check on it either. So like you could be earning $200,000 a year making your paychecks and still claim and still get the payments, and then oh
I actually got the letter from the CRA saying, because I'm self-employed. Now, yes, I access these programs. I was self-employed, and because of
yeah,
COVID shutting down downtown Calgary, where most of my clients are, I was gonna declare bankruptcy. So if not
yeah,
for that program. However, when the CRA sent a letter and said, "Hey, we just want to make sure you were eligible for this," I said, "Happily, here's my documentation on my paperwork. Here's what I made $65,000 a year before COVID. My income, my earned income dropped to 12,000
jeez,
during
yep,
COVID. Then I picked up a second job, which brought my tax filing that year up. I think it was like 34, 35,000, and then the CRB benefits on top of that brought me up to 45,000, which was the goal of the program was to get you at, I think it was like either 50 or 66% of your pre-COVID income.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
like how unemployment works, right? It's like a percentage of what you were when you were working.
exactly. And
I,
that
I
the
honestly,
big
I'd rather have
oversight.
been working.
I would have rather been working too, but the big oversight is even if you were, so if you were injured, if you were sick, if you were disabled, if you were injured,
If you
if
got
you were
COVID.
on, if you had COVID, if you were on unemployment, if you didn't have a job, they filed everything under CRB. Everything went under
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yep.
And so they come back and say, well, you weren't eligible for it because X, Y, and Z. It's like you didn't have an option. You
Oh yeah,
didn't
I
have
know
an option to file
someone.
anything else.
They're a seasonal worker, and so every year, when the season ends, they get the pink slip so that they
Yep.
can go on EI for the off season,
Yep.
and they got an automatic CRB deposit.
Yep.
Now, if you're just a normal person who lives paycheck to paycheck, like most Canadians do, and the government drops like $4,000 into your bank account, is your first thing you do call up the CRA and say, "Hey, I just want to make sure. I want to double check and do my due diligence. You gave me this $4,000. I just want to double check where it came from." Or is the first thing you do go out and get a bunch of beer?
Well, you're going to go out and spend it, obviously,
You're gonna
because
get
why
beer.
not?
Or perhaps you catch up some bills. You're like, "Hey, man, I fell behind
Yeah.
on my car or credit card payments. I'm just gonna, the responsible thing that an adult would do." But again, just because the first thing people didn't do was question why the money was there, now they're getting burned on it.
Oh, of course, left and right, people are just getting blown out.
Yeah. I'm glad. Like, I turned in my paperwork to the CRA. I never did get a confirmation, but I also haven't been like served with a notice that, hey, you owe us this money. So I'm figuring I'm okay, but I really don't know.
Well,
But
fingers
but I
crossed.
was happy to I'll turn in as many bank statements and paperwork as they want to see. They will see that my credit card debt almost tripled
Yeah.
because of COVID.
Hmm.
So if they want to look at it, sure, go for it. I'm happy to prove that COVID almost cost me the entirety of my income.
Good grief.
Um, and I, like I said, I've said this a million times. I would have rather have been working. You didn't
Absolutely.
have to shut all of downtown Calgary down.
Hmm.
I would have worn a mask. I took the vax. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm vaccinated for many other things. Why was this one any different? I've taken a flu shot before.
Right.
I hate that the government, although I'm seeing possibly when the government shielded the pharmaceutical companies from liability, I'm seeing some developments that possibly that was unconstitutional.
Oh, there's no way. I mean, there's absolutely no way that you can sign off a waiver saying that, well, if you create something that's gonna like, create a mass genocide, then you're just okay. You're fine. There's
Yeah.
no way that would hold up.
Well, and it's funny too. So, of course, the government's emergencies act during a trucker convoy was ruled to be it was ruled to be unreasonable exercise of the executive power, is the
Mhm.
correct legal term. Um, and that has caused a lawsuit to be filed because people's bank accounts were frozen. The
Yeah.
authority used to freeze those bank accounts was the Emergencies Act. So, therefore, if the Emergencies Act was unreasonable and incorrect, that's a prima facie case that the freezing of your bank account was also unreasonable and incorrect.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure.
Um, I would love to talk about housing for a lot more, but I do want to move on because we've got a
Yeah,
lot of I want to actually get to the topic I brought you in for. I didn't think we'd have such
absolutely.
a long conversation about the housing market in Canada. I know I've talked about it in my last episode 2. It was where I just kind of did a canvas of political issues in Canada and around the world. I know I talked about it then too. So
Mhm.
for those listening in the chat, if you want to hear kind of my breakdown of my take on some of the issues across the country and housing, you'll probably hear quite a number of things repeated from this episode, but you can check out episode number 2 on this channel of Everything is Political. But I wanted to get to the second half of this question. So, of
Boom.
course, like I said at the top of the show, you've been very public, you've been very vocal that you identify as a transgender individual. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask about your journey through realizing that this was who you really were, and then talk about how any community supports, any outreach that you either took part in or were exposed to in that critical time in your life.
Huh. It's interesting. Looking back at it is much easier than being in the moment, right? Because being in the moment of it, I was always pressured to be a certain type of person or be a certain type of way and think certain ways or act certain ways or blah 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 blah. So I always tried to fit into the mold that I was expected to be. But looking back, like I knew who I was, like as far back as I can remember. It was like 7 years old. I knew who I was back then, but I didn't understand that, if that makes any sense. I didn't have the wisdom of being old enough to make that decision and understand it. So as I grew up and I tried to fit myself into this person that people wanted me to be and expected me to be, and how society had taught me that I should be, and I had bought into it, I believed it. And then I spent many, many years of just like not understanding why I had depression and anxiety and was like socially awkward and all these other things that I just didn't feel like myself. And so I over a number of years, like this is from my teenage years. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff going on in my life. My parents were divorced when I was young, like 13 years old. So all of these things came up, and there was always excuses as to why I had felt those ways and like why I had, like, oh well, that's just because of this. Oh, it's just because of that. Oh, it's just because of blah blah blah. Never really deep diving into like it's actually because I'm trying to be someone I'm not. So there's a lot of stuff that went on in my life. I never really had anyone that was there to kind of tell me, like, this is what it could be, this is what you're going through, blah blah blah. Just had to kind of feel it out for myself. And when a number of things happened, like when I had been engaged at one point. I had been expecting a family at one point. Unfortunately, we had miscarried, so that was an entirely different situation. And I started to realize around that point, it's like, look, there is something that I'm just denying of myself, and I need to lean into that, and I need to explore that and look into that. Now, I had up to that point in my life, around like 20, I was around 25. Up to that point in my life, I'd always believed that there was a very high bar required to get hormone replacement or, go through all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I had always just been like, well, you know what? I don't really meet that threshold. So I'm just going to live with this and I'm just going to truck through it. I'm just going to, obviously, it's not for me, blah, blah, blah. So up until a point where I just literally could not be in public. I was in my first year working at Costco, and I would just literally be having panic attacks and having anxiety attacks when I was at work. Nothing happened, like nothing was going on. There was literally nothing wrong. I would just be physically incapable of going to work because as soon as I got into public, as soon as I got into a crowd, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't operate.
Yeah.
And so
And
I
if someone's
realized,
never had a panic attack before,
yeah,
I've witnessed someone have it before. And the first thing, post attack, there's always a sense of shame, like
yeah.
what was wrong with me, right? It's like,
Mhm.
because again, when there's no good explanation for why you had that physical reaction, but it was a physical reaction, like you can't deny that something was not correct within you, but
Mhm.
being unsure why or what exactly was the problem, it brings on this sense of, well, is it all in my head or am I going crazy? You start having that self doubt.
Exactly.
Doubt is probably the most operative word I'd use there. Self doubt.
Exactly. You have that doubt and just it's like a short circuit. It just keeps going. And so I realized, I'm like, I can't, like, I have to make a change. I'm like, I have to do something because this is becoming a point where that is just not, it's not traversable. I can't go past this anymore. So I went to I went and I did a bunch of research. I looked around. I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do? Because like I always thought you had to go to a psychologist and get a referral and do all this other stuff, blah blah blah. So I reached out to whatever I could find on Google, like the trans like outreach, whatever else,
Hmm.
and asked some questions. And I'm like, well, what do I need to do? They're just like, oh, you don't need a referral or anything. You just go to the doctor. Just tell them that this is what you want to do. And I'm like, that's not what I had been led to believe, but sure.
It's a good time to bring this
Okay.
article in.
Yeah, I'm like, "It's not what I was led to believe," but okay. So, like, I went to and I don't have a family doctor here. Like, my family doctor was back in Barrie. I haven't been there in dog's age. But, I have a walk-in clinic just down the road from me, which I pretty much just use as my family doctor anyway, so I go there all the time.
Mm.
So, I got in there, I went into the clinic, saw the doctor. I'm like, "Yeah, this like, I believe that I'm trans. I would like to go through hormone replacement therapy." And without even, like, looking up from the computer, the doctor's like, "Okay, like, do you want, what do you want out of it? Blah, blah, blah. All right, here you go." Writes the prescription, no questions asked. I'm just like, "That's it?" It's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, here's 6 months of medication, come back to me in 6 months, we'll do more blood tests." I was floored.
I assume they asked, like, do you have any pre-existing conditions that might conflict with the
No,
medication? Oh,
no.
did the pharmacist at least ask? Like, hey, do you have a
Uh,
history of like blood clots or whatever?
well, the pharmacist, like, told me about the, potential for the stuff like that, but the doctor was just like, if you might just keep an eye if you get blood clots, blah blah blah. Just like very baseline, just very milk
Oh
toast like
my goodness.
reaction. I was just like, holy shit. I'm like, that is it?
And if you
That
don't
is it?
mind, around what year was this? Just which decade is fine if you don't want to say.
That I think I was probably 20. No, oh no, I was 31 at that point. So,
Yeah.
oh my
Okay.
god, it was like 2018,
And so, like,
2017,
fairly
2018.
recently in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so, obviously, this has become much more of a political issue to the forefront. I'll just throw that up at the moment. Um, because um, the minimum age required is starting to go down, because even the short, 6 years ago when you were going through this, it would have been unheard of or uncommon for someone under the age of 18 to seek out this treatment.
Mhm.
That's not the case anymore. And so that's where we're starting to get this clash between, okay, did we go to a little too far on this? That's why I wanted to bring in this article. The reason I'm going with National Post's version of this article is because it was originally published by, admittedly, a pretty far right outlet, and I don't like the editorializing they do,
Yeah.
where it sounds like such a got you article, and when I read the actual text, like in their full context, I'm like, okay, I see the red flags they're going for, but it's not as bad as they say it is. And so I went with this article
Yeah.
instead of the more
Yeah.
sensationalized one. But there was a leak recently where this private messaging app that allows doctors remote access to patients, which got more popular in COVID.
Of course.
COVID was really accelerated this type of medical, because it used to be like every doctor would tell you, "Well, I'm not going to give you a diagnosis unless I like meet the patient."
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not gonna tell you unless we're in person. Like,
So, but COVID really changed that, and I don't think that's such a major. Like, I think most doctors would be like, I at least want to meet them in person, even if it has to be over camera. But I
yeah.
just want to like look at their face and talk to them before I make the diagnosis.
Mhm.
But there's absolutely exceptions in that, and so the political issue obviously is, what is the reasonable limit? Of course, several provinces in Canada are starting to bring in legislation that says, "Hey, minors, we're going to put some rules around. If you're under the age of 18 or 17 or 15, you can't do this stuff with them."
And I honestly do think that it should be at least 18, and even 18, I think, is a bit young, but I think at least 18
Yeah,
should be the
and and it sounds like doctors have been agreeing with this, right? Where doctors are coming in saying like, "Look, I have some questions," but then, well, this is the W Path. Have you heard of W Path before this
No,
article?
I haven't heard of
Okay.
WPATH.
Um, U.S. based environmental progress. in, I've heard this name before. Where do I know this person from? Michael
Oh,
Schellenberger. Anyways, it was leaked out by American news media. Um, yeah, this is where a National Post says like, okay, it's not as big a deal as they say it is. But you
yeah.
can see that people who participate in this, doctors, therapists, social workers, activists, right, share information about cases, share advice on how to treat youth and adults with gender dysphoria. All sounds good in theory, right? Like
Mhm.
nothing's wrong at this point. Hey, yeah, the internet's allowed people to reach out to one another and get that support that perhaps you didn't have when you were younger.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you start getting the political, right? You start getting that political bent about prescribing puberty blockers, hormone gender they call it gender affirming hormones, but we know it as HRT, right? Hormone
Yeah.
replacement therapy.
Hormone
Uh,
replacement therapy, yeah.
which there is a high profile member of the trans community out of Canada that we've made passing reference to in the past. One
Unfortunately.
one Keffels, who is a big proponent of the bathtub HRT drugs.
Unfortunate.
And it gives ammunition for right wing commentators to say, "See, this is the slippery slope you told us not to worry about." Do you remember that
And
meme? Right, the meme,
oh, yeah.
the woman she told you not, or sorry, the man she told you not to worry about.
Yeah. Oh, good
This is
lord.
this is the issue that Keffels told you not to worry about.
And, like, like, the thing here, it's really frustrating because having lived through this, and I can say, like, would my life have been different if I started taking HRT at age 7 when I initially, like, recognized this, but didn't really understand it? My life might have been different, sure. Would I have been happier? Hard to say. Like, it's impossible to say. Am
Yeah,
I happy
impossible
now with
to
myself? Like, I'm happy with myself now, and I can live with myself as I am now.
the Twitter
There's
files.
Twitter files. Okay.
Schellenberger seems to have been involved with the Twitter file dump. That's
There you
probably where
go.
I heard the name before. So, I mean, I'm sure he's a reputable journalist. I
Mhm.
didn't like the editorialization of his version of that.
And yeah, and so, like, is there stuff that is there is a lot of stuff that does not get discussed, right? And
Hmm.
the view that people like Keffels and whatever else push, which is incorrect, is that this HRT is the magical thing that's going to change every problem in your life, which it doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't at all. And when you
It,
market something as a magical pill that's going to take care of all of your problems, guess what? Guess what's going to happen for a bunch of awkward teenagers and a bunch of awkward children who are trying to find a silver bullet solution to all their life's problems? They're going to start doing it, regardless if they're trans or not.
so here's one example of someone who's given some very, very well grounded pushback saying, hey, we're trying to explain these concepts to people who haven't even had biology in high school yet. Like
Exactly.
I remember my grade 11 biology class, and it's like, okay, so knowing what I know now about the SOGI issue, transgenderism, therapy, knowing that before I took grade 11 biology would have left me so damn confused.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why this doesn't equal that.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't have the correct context because they're like, you haven't learned this. It's like, I'll give you a perfect example. It's like trying to explain a dirty joke to an innocent child who knows nothing about sex,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? And someone comes on the TV and they just giggle at you. You start giggling at some weird sexual innuendo. Like you're watching Archer, right? And they do the
Yeah.
phrasing,
Yeah.
and you laugh at it, and the little kid is like, "Why are you laughing? Why was that funny?" He was just talking about what, oh, like when Lana's like, "Are you coming?" and Archer says, "No, but I am breathing really hard," and you're like, "Ah, that's a pretty funny joke." And you have to try to explain to a kid who has no frame of reference why that was funny.
Exactly.
And that's exactly the same.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example of how incongruent that this can be if you don't have the foundational knowledge and education. And you can't teach people how they feel,
No.
but you can talk about it. It's
Mhm.
always a conversation, and I think it's a conversation best had with your parents, but not every parent is going to be approachable in that regard. In
Well,
fact,
that's the problem, right?
you'll find a lot of kids don't actually trust their parents with that kind of information, and they end up getting it from somewhere else.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, sometimes the internet.
And that's the easiest place for them to get it, sadly.
And it's not anything that the parent has done wrong per se. Um, I think it's a very complex relationship between a parent and a child, especially a preteen.
Mhm.
Um, as they're trying to set off they're trying to get their independence. I know kids that are like 10 and 11 years old that are trying to fully independent themselves from their parents. Chris, I don't remember if you know when you were 10 years old, but I certainly didn't have everything figured out back then.
No, exactly. Like, and it was different for myself because, like, I did, end up leaving my house at 13 and getting, like, a full-time job at 14 and all this other stuff, so it was much different, but, like, looking at the average experience of a child, it's like, are we really gonna go back and be like and start saying that it's okay for, like, 10-year-olds to get facial piercings and like painting their nails black and wearing all this, like, it's blah 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 blah, because that's how they identify. I mean, there's an argument back then when kids were doing that when they were smoking when they were 13, right? When they were goth. Oh, you're devil worshippers, you're devil worshippers, blah blah blah. It's all that stuff happened too. But it's
Yeah,
like it's a phase, people grow out of it, sure. But
or
like
video games.
being yeah, video games.
Yeah,
Like being
remember
but
you
being
remember the discussion after Columbine with the violent video
yeah,
games like Doom, Duke Nukem?
exactly. Yeah. But, like, what people don't understand is that being trans is not a phase. That's not a it's literally it's a thing that affects you permanently. Like, you
Yeah,
can't
no, no,
just
no.
not be trans.
Yeah, being trans is not a phase, but thinking that you might be trans sometimes is, especially if it's an external.
It's
Um,
in So here's the thing with it, it's an intoxicating thought because it gets taught to kids not as this is a permanent lifestyle change that you don't have a choice about. It's like being gay or being a lesbian. You don't have a choice in it. It's something you don't have control over. Period. It's this intoxicating thought, right? Because it's like, well, just get the surgery, just get this, just shave your head, just like cut your boobs off, just get this, and then you're going to be perfect and happy forever. That's what it's
Yeah.
sold to as to children, and they don't get the long-term implications of what
Yeah.
that means. They don't get that well, I'm not going to be able to have babies, I'm not going to be able to do this, or I'm never going to be able to grow breasts again. They don't get that. All they get is that all of my problems right now are going to be solved by this one thing. They don't
And
have a concept of what that is.
they look in the mirror and they're still not happy with what they see even after the surgeries. You can,
Nope.
as many surgeries as you could
Exactly.
possibly believe, but if you cannot look in the mirror and say, I'm happy with the person who's in the mirror right now, right?
Exactly.
And
And that's why we see
that
so
must have
many.
been I'm sorry, I just that must have
Yeah.
been like personally for you, that must have been a struggle at some point where you looked in the mirror and you said, I don't like the person who's looking back at me.
I never understood what it was. To be right honest, like it wasn't even like it wasn't a fact of me hating myself, which is why I held off on doing HRT for so long, because that was one of the key indicators of being like, well, you have to hate yourself to a point of jumping off if you want to get HRT. So I'm like, well, I'm not there, so I don't have that. But
I
it
think
was always a
hate
it,
might be too strong of a word,
yeah,
but
well,
absolutely again, the idea that again, you have to understand that once you make the change, you have to be pretty confident that when you look in the mirror, that's the person you want to be. If you don't
and that
have that confidence, it's a cosmetic surgery with some very permanent effects on people.
Well, and that's it. It's the thing. It's like you're not going to change. You're still going to be you. Going through HRT is not going to just magically make you like the opposite sex. It's not going to magically, it's not going to be some Sailor Moon transformation where you get to turn in from a 6'2" lanky awkward person to a 5'2", Japanese princess. It doesn't work that way. You're still going to be you. You're still going to like the same things you like as you do currently. It's going to make you feel more comfortable about yourself. And that's really what it was about for me. When I started taking estrogen, I shit you not, like within a week of taking estrogen, I was not anxious. I didn't have anxiety. I didn't have depression. Everything
Mhm.
just I was perfectly fine, and I was very happy with what I was doing. I
And within
started.
1 month, you can absolutely reverse the course of the treatment,
Oh yeah.
but it's after years
Oh
or
yeah.
after a surgery. And that's why I think
That's
I mean, again, if
irreversible. It's
we're talking about
irreversible.
everything is political, and the political bend is that both sides just get absolutely crazy when it comes to this issue. One side says, well, no, they'll just grow out of it. It's just a phase. And the other side says, well, no, we need to 100% affirmation immediately and permanently. And it's
Well,
like,
and
no,
it's
you're both wrong. You're
they're
both
both wrong. They're
you're
both
you're
wrong
both stupid.
because it's a personal choice. It's to a point. Like I agree that kids need to be protected from making really stupid decisions, right? So we don't want our
Yes.
kids smoking when they're 12. We don't want our kids shooting heroin when they're 12, right? Like obviously
We don't
we
want
have
them shooting guns when they're 12.
we don't want them shooting guns when they're 12. I mean, unless you're in Texas, but like there's certain things that we have that are, standards for we
Yeah.
don't want our children to be exposed to this, and that's fine. But like being exposed to certain things and being educated about certain things are two separate things. Give them the education so that when it comes time for them to have lived enough to gain wisdom to make that decision for themselves, they can make the correct decision. Until then, we do need to have certain things that are cut off and blocked. Like I personally don't think that any 12-year-old, unless it's life changing, like unless it's like life saving, there should be no surgeries done on kids that young, in my opinion. I don't care if they swear up and down, blah blah blah. That's fine.
Well,
When you are of age and you can make that decision by yourself, you can make that decision by yourself. But
well,
like,
even if they go to the point where like I'm suicidal unless I get this surgery, the surgery isn't going to fix that.
it won't
The
fix
surgery
it.
is not going to make you not suicidal.
No.
I would bet my left nut on that.
Well, and that's why we see such a high rate of suicide in these cases, because they think they've been told and they have it in their mind that this is the way
Yeah.
to get it fixed. And then when it happens and they get everything they want and then it's still a problem, they have no other option.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, again, the what the law can do, I mean, what the policy and the politics can do is
Yeah,
protect you from yourself
exactly.
in your most vulnerable moments when you make a decision that you'll end up regretting, and that's what the article gets into right here, right?
Yeah.
Reproductive regret. um, the law can be there to help you protect you from yourself. Now, we did briefly touch on the education component, and that's also a big issue right now in Canada, and a little bit in the U.S. too. We've seen there was a governor's race in, I think it was Virginia, that was flipped mostly because of the education issue,
Yep.
parental choice in education. In Canada, we frame it as the SOGI issue, which is sexual orientation, gender identity.
Hmm.
um, Now, I've always been, of course, being a proponent of the nuclear family theory, I've always been of the opinion that the parents are the best source of information when it comes to sexual education. But, Crumb, I'm happy to hear your side of what you believe.
I mean, parents should be, but in reality, there's a lot of ignorance there too. There's a lot of parents
Mm.
that do not want it to be a thing and want to push their own opinions on it. And it's like that's fine, but you don't get to choose if your kid is gay. You don't get to choose
No.
if your kid is a lesbian. You don't get to choose who they partner with. And unfortunately, you don't get to choose the mistakes they make either. You have like at some point as a parent, you have to realize that your kids are going to do something stupid and it's going to hurt them, and they're going to learn more from that than they are going to learn from you sheltering them.
And unfortunately,
And
there is no owner's manual on raising
no,
kids. Parents will make dumb, boneheaded mistakes,
yeah,
but that's part of the freedom. The responsibility of the freedom that we were given is that you got to be willing to screw it up. And I don't think a lot of people are comfortable with the idea that a parent screwing up affects their kids.
yeah,
A lot of people are not comfortable with that reality, and that's when they start getting into this, well, we have to regulate, schools have to be the one in charge, do not notify the parents because they're killing trans and gay youth. First of all, cite one example, and second of all, I mean, is who is morally superior in the scenario where a parent's trying to teach their child homophobia and you intervene to oppose that education of homophobia? You are trampling on parents' rights. They are misusing their rights, yes, but you have
mhm,
to admit that you are trampling on parental rights in order to correct their misuse of it.
exactly. And it's a situation of you have to let things like you have to let nature take its course. Unfortunately, there's no better way of
Sometimes,
saying
yeah,
it.
like not everyone gets to be a winner. And you know what? That's the first lie every parent tells you. That's the no, actually, let me correct that. That's the first lie that every teacher tells you.
Yes, exactly.
Is that, if you try really hard, you can succeed. Well, turns out there's actually a limited number of people who can succeed. It's
Yep.
roughly 50%.
Exactly. Once you dip below that, then you start to be on the losing side of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand. Like, are we gonna ask our teachers go around and say no? You remember that when the Simpsons covered that, right? And Bart was in like preschool or whatever, and his teacher's like, and the moral of the story is that everyone gets a chance, even me, teacher. No, Bart, you're hopeless. That was really good satire because that was what
Very good.
that is absolutely excellent satire because it is the message that is reality, but no
Yep.
one wants to say it.
Nobody likes it because
No one
we
ever
have to
wants to be
admit.
the person that says, "Hey, you're just not smart enough." Dr. Jordan Peterson talked about this, right? In the knowledge economy, there are
Mhm.
people who just are not smart enough to be successful.
It's true. And they don't have the ability to recognize and learn from their own mistakes. It's
There are
an
such things as
unfortunate
stupid
thing.
questions.
True. It's
But
true. But it's so frustrating because, like, it's not something you know until you get older. It's one of those things you gain with wisdom, and it's like it you gain the wisdom with age, and it's like you look back and it's like, "Man, if I could just download this information and get people to understand it."
Hmm.
but there are so many people that are not ready to understand it and don't want to.
Yeah, and choice again, like education over choice, it will always be the question. It
Mhm.
seems like right now, if I would just take the political temperature of Canada and the US, it sounds like parental rights is winning, but only slightly. Um, and
Yeah,
that's,
it's yeah.
it's going to be a big issue when that next federal election comes up in Canada. They're going to be talking about it.
And honestly, I think the solution that would make the most sense, the King Solomon solution, whatever you want to call it, is make it available for everyone to learn. And if you don't want your child to learn it, pull them from the program.
Yep. And that's actually the laws that are being passed across the provinces right now. So if people are not aware, the Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and Alberta have all introduced legislation to force schools to give notice that they're about to teach sexual education and have
Hmm.
the option for opting out.
Yeah.
And it's really funny when you get into, so Edmonton had this issue with a Muslim majority school. Um, they were not teaching they were not teaching pride issues.
Hmm.
And because of the politics of pride, is that's the next topic I want to get to. Um, because of the politics of pride, they were actually too scared to call out this Muslim majority school. And they were like, no, no, it's the Catholic schools that are a problem. Like everyone loves
No, for
criticizing the
God's
Catholic
sake.
schools.
Of
But
course, of course.
when a Muslim school was doing the exact same thing, suddenly there was just crickets. It was silence. And I remember in this, this kind of, there's a like a Facebook group that I was a part of, and they're discussing it in that group. And one of the people who like would be on the more progressive side of the political aisle, dared say, you know what, I think I want to have a chat with that principal and just kind of, just educate them a little bit. And oh, how fast they were slapped down by the intersectionality crowd. I was like, man, you might have just made a new conservative that day.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because I mean,
It,
honestly, that's how thin that line is between the let's go with like Americans know them as independents. In Canada,
mhm.
we just kind of call them the center of the
Yeah,
political spectrum.
centrist. Yeah,
Yeah, the centrists. Like the difference between centrists and any of the partisan divides is so thin. One bad experience and you will drive them straight to the other party.
of course. And
So,
I'm always of the opinion that you should do your research on the person and you should vote for the best person, not the best party. Because if you're voting for a party, then that's when you're really throwing your vote away.
yeah.
Because you're just making sure that your voice doesn't have any sway
Well,
or matter at all.
that's my major criticism of the mixed member proportional electoral reform is that although it's conducive to like these smaller kind of single issue parties, but you're sort of you have to take what you're given because they will always name their most popular insiders into those
Yeah.
at will seats that they
Yep.
win. And
Of
so
course.
you don't get the chance to like beat someone in a nomination. You don't get a chance to say, I normally vote conservative, but you're a dickhead, and I'm gonna vote against you.
Yeah. And again, the whole thing needs an overhaul because we're seeing it largely in the conservative aspect of things because they're trying to usurp Trudeau right now. But it worked. It worked extremely well in Ontario as well in getting Doug Ford elected. It's the populist vote. It's the person that can go up there and smile and act really like nonchalant and use their charisma to get them in. They might not have any political acumen whatsoever. They might be a complete idiot, which is what we have in Ontario right now, unfortunately. But there is still no better options. Um,
Mhm.
that's not a politician though, and we're at a point now, and like this is a discussion I've had. Like we have Friday meetings with the little neighborhood group that we have here, but like this is a discussion was talking about. It's like we have local politicians in the city council right now that literally sat there unfazed when an out of town developer told their citizens If you can't afford rent in your city, then move to the country. Leave.
Most of them probably think that.
Well, that's the thing. It's like how can you even entertain someone coming in from a different city and telling your taxpayers if you don't like it, get out? Like
Because they were too cowardly to say it themselves.
well, that and the fact of
That
the matter is that that's how they feel. So then
Yep.
why are we putting people like that in charge of us? Why are we putting people in the seats in City Hall right now that don't want us there?
I've studied this phenomena quite a bit. It's, I mean, the single biggest reason is the disengagement from politics.
Mhm.
As we've become more polarized, as the distance between the left and the right continues to get wider, more and more people just check out. And
Yeah,
you see it with the turnout every election. It fluctuates up and down, but the overall trend does go down over time.
absolutely.
We now have like less than 50% turnouts in some elections.
It's ridiculous because people either don't know how to or have been browbeaten into thinking that their vote doesn't matter because it's you don't get taught about the importance of voting in school anymore. That went out the window the last year of my high school.
Yeah,
They
I
got rid of civics
remember
altogether.
taking civics in high school, and like the party system was never brought up. You learned the
Yeah,
three branches of government, some very basic intro to law stuff, like what a court is, and that's about
yeah,
it. And
exactly.
if I recall correctly, in the Ontario system, it's a half a credit because you share it with, I
It
think it's
was
called career guidance.
it was a half credit, and then the last year of my high school they abolished both. So now
Oh,
that's it's just
well,
elective.
you could thank Harris for taking out grade 13 too.
Yeah. So it's like we have pared out any sort of education on how our government works. And so people are completely ignorant on how our government works. And like I said, like, we as Canadians, we pay more attention to American politics and then federal politics and then provincial politics and then municipal politics,
Oh, they
which
are like the
arguably,
yeah, municipal politics is like the ugly stepchild of
yeah,
any relationship. Man, the amount so municipal politics has the greatest impact on your day-to-day life.
exactly. And we pay
But
no attention to it.
no attention. The power that any city has, small towns not so much, but most people live in the big cities, so just
Yeah.
go on that assumption. The amount of power that the city councils have to regulate every aspect of the street you live on,
Yeah.
and the idea, and you have no idea how much that power is until they decide to build an airport beside your community.
Right. And we vote in these people or don't because I guarantee most people don't even vote in municipal elections. But we vote in these people that actively hate us.
Okay, here's a fun challenge. So, everyone in Canada, where you live, you have three representatives. You have your ward councillor or your alderman or whatever language
Yeah,
your city uses. You have your either member of provincial parliament or member of legislative assembly, depending on the province you live in, and you have your federal member of parliament. I challenge you to name any one of the three of them.
exactly.
Any one of the
I
three.
bet people couldn't. I bet people couldn't.
I would love to see what the percentage is. Can you name your I would say that the highest percentage would be able to name their member of parliament.
And
I would say
I
that
mean I
would be
could
the
tell you all three
highest
of mine.
percentage.
I could tell you all three of mine.
Yeah.
Debbie Chapman's our ward counselor. We have Ashlyn Clancy that just took over for that just got put in on MPP because our NDP MPP stepped down because she couldn't afford childcare anymore. Ironic. And then Mike Morris is our MP. That's our three.
Yeah, I've got Ron Leipert federally for Calgary. What is it called? Calgary Signal Hill. Um, Janet, I can't say her name. Aramenko. She's NDP for the um, the provincial assembly, and then it's Pootmans is my ward councillor. I think it's Richard Pootmans. I actually worked for my previous ward counselor on his. He ran for mayor,
Oh, nice.
so I worked on his campaign. But
Yeah,
anyways,
but I guarantee you, most people wouldn't even be able to name one, if that. Like it's
well,
baffling.
And
baffling.
translate this to the US. Can you name your state representative, your federal congressman, and your local county board member? I don't know what I guess the cities in the US would have the same thing, like counselors. But
Yeah,
if you're in like unincorporated county or whatever, just name one of your county boardmen,
exactly.
or boardwoman, to be inclusive. But
It's I don't understand. And then we have the people that they just don't care about they don't care about anything but money. And that's
I
what's
mean,
running our cities.
honestly, is the have has anyone given us a reason to care about anything besides money?
Well, not until some notice slaps up on your door to make you
Yeah,
care about it.
exactly. Right. And that's look, I've been a political operative for a very long time. The number of people who come to us with issues that are not in our jurisdiction, like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
not door knocking for this election. It's federal. Oh, hey, I have a complaint about the zoning in the city.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
No,
the
I've
people
I've
answer the
already
door and they're like, oh, your federal election? Yeah, I vote progressive conservative all the time.
exactly. No,
Ugh,
I've been
they haven't been the PCs since 2000. It's
I've
been
been asked by
24
my
years, people.
I've been asked by the local like the group around here when when I'm going to announce my run for city council.
I would ask that question. It takes a very I do know it takes it is one of the biggest sacrifices you can make to your mental health is to declare yourself a serious candidate for any elected position.
Mhm.
The what you open yourself up to in terms of personal attacks will hardly ever be equaled in any other profession. Honestly, the only
Oh,
thing I think would
absolutely.
be more mentally stressful is to like volunteer to go to Ukraine right now.
Well, I think I'm uniquely qualified in that aspect because I've had people from Los Angeles coming after me. So
Yeah, you've had people. I wish I could get into that. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time here. I don't want to keep you too long, but
yeah, no
I
worries
certainly wanted to get into the politics of the Pride community.
for
Now,
sure.
first off, I want to ask what your association, how high of a level have you associated with members of Pride within your local area?
None at all, actually, to be honest.
Not at
I've
all.
I understand what it used to represent. It doesn't represent that at all anymore. So I don't really.
You would agree that it's gone very political, right?
Oh, it's pretty much just a political vehicle now at this point.
Yeah, and I mean the problem. We have a good example out here in Calgary because we have the Calgary has a Pride March every year. One of the local MPs, Michelle Rempel, has always taken the lead on kind of getting the Conservative MPs permission to march in that parade as a show of solidarity, and they will just outright say, "No, we don't want your support.
Mhm.
You are the evil people. We don't want you here." Jason Kenney did the same thing. Like it's weird because people have speculated that Jason Kenney is in the closet, and then they banned him from Pride, and it's like,
That's funny.
and I use the royal they.
Mhm.
The organizers of Pride in Calgary just don't understand that you are talking out both sides of your mouth when you make those two statements consecutive to each other.
Absolutely. No, it's largely because it's a group that has been historically oppressed over a long time. But then you have the case of the people who are extremely power hungry and they just refuse to to give up any sort of ground. And so it's gotten a lot of people a lot of money in terms of sponsorships and everything else and blah blah blah. And there's a lot of people that don't want to let it go. And
There is definitely money. There is some, I don't know, activist money is just dark money by default. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm singling Pride out as being
mhm.
funded by dark money. Give me a social issue, and whoever funds the activism is giving dark money. But
Well,
that said, yes, there is some dark money that goes into these organizations. And there are people who get rich off
yeah.
pretending to be offended on behalf
Oh,
of members of the
absolutely.
community.
Case in point, Keffels. Case in point.
I'd love to go into that a little bit more, but I think we'll get way off track if we do, and probably pop a blood vessel or two in the process.
Of course.
Oh, look up the myth of reverse racism. Reverse racism is just racism by the University of Calgary Anti-Racism Department. Well, that would be the DEI version. I've had the displeasure of dealing with University of Calgary Student Union before, and even at my own undergrad experience, the what are they called? GLAD, I think, is what they're called at
Oh
high
yeah.
school. Um, Again, it's all of the left progressive partisan individuals that make up that. If you are a gay conservative, you feel a ton of pressure to explain both yourself and the actions of others when you're in that room. And this, I'm it's hearsay. I'll admit it, it's hearsay. I don't feel comfortable revealing this person's identity,
No, of course.
just because they've expressed concern for their safety being
Well,
in that
and
environment.
you have to like because you get you get demolished by people who expect you to be a certain way when you wear a certain like uniform or flag or
Yeah.
label or whatever you want to call it. But
Well, I was outwardly pro Trump in 2020, um, and or not 2016. Sorry, 2016. That's when I was in university. When he won, and being a member of a visible minority gave some of these people some fits because they're like, I want to call you a racist, but you're brown. I know the lighting doesn't really show it, but I actually have a pretty dark shade of brown
hmm
being First Nations. Especially when I grow my hair out, it becomes really obvious that I am not white.
hmm
Um, and I've had someone walk up to me, no lie, and they literally just said what they were thinking. Like, how can you how can you support a racist like Trump being who you are? And I'm like, who what do you think I am exactly? What does that mean? Who does being who you are supposed to mean to you?
right.
I am a proud conservative. I have been pro Republican almost all of my life. He was the Republican nominee. By default, I support him unless he gave me a very compelling reason not to, and I
hmm
did not find one.
Exactly.
I mean,
Well,
I
so
know a lot of people are like, but Trump was a Democrat. Okay, so he was a Democrat donor. That doesn't make you a Democrat, by the way. If you're a multi billionaire businessman trying to curry political favor in Democrat New York City, I do expect you're going to make a couple donations to the Democrat Party.
exactly.
If I had $1 billion, I would donate to Justin Trudeau's, the Liberal Party, and then I'd be like, "Hey, Justin Trudeau, let's talk some business. I'm a max donor to your party. I just want to, I'm not saying like quid pro quo. I just wanted to point out that fact to give you the context so that when we talk to each other, money greases the wheels, man. That
It
I will
does.
never fault someone for putting their money somewhere they think it can benefit them.
Absolutely. But that's like even the political parties don't even follow their own standards. But
That
that's
was Pep brings this up. That was the radio host who ran against Gavin Newsom, wasn't it? Who was that? Who was that person? The name escapes me, but I remember this. There was a like a black radio host out in California who was running against Gavin Newsom for governor. I think at one point someone dumped piss on him.
Jesus Christ.
But I remember that. I forget the name.
Oh my god, this world.
But anyways, ah, and finally, I wanted to pivot to something you had mentioned again at the top of the
Yeah.
show that you were involved with Kitchener Comic Con for a couple
Yeah.
of years. I wanted to talk about, actually more generally, the politics of fandoms.
Oh boy.
Um, Now, of course, you're very well aware of the Vic Mignogna situation. I
Oh
think
yes.
most of us in the Ricada sphere of the universe are at least aware of the issue there.
hmm
Um, I just want to hear if you've got some stories from the ground about some of these, some of these moments where you're talking to fellow organizers or you're talking to sponsors, and by the end of that conversation, you're saying to yourself, "Wow, this person and I would never get along at a supper table. They're just so, they're so partisan, political in an unnecessary place, like a gaming convention or an anime fandom or comic books, right?"
Well, when you're talking about people who run conventions like historically, you gotta they are a bit off in terms of personalities. It takes a certain individual to run them, and from everything that I've seen in talking to people, especially in Ontario and Toronto, like more so, they're all lunatics. Like they are all absolute pant shitting lunatics. It's 100%. They like it is bizarre because like yes, it's political, but it's like it's more so just how whatever they want it to be, right? Because
So
there
it's
is
cart
a
before the horse. Yeah,
yeah
sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, so it's more of a
yeah
cart before the horse scenario, right? Where their craziness is leading to their political uh,
yeah
conflicts.
exactly, largely that, as well as like their own personal psychotic nonsense. So what I'll point to is there's a convention in Hamilton years ago. It was a fairly sizable convention, fairly successful convention. The person who ran it was independently wealthy. His family is a bunch of lawyers and judges and whatever else. So he just it's his way of doing what he wanted to do and getting all the toys in one place. And it turned out that years later he was embezzling money from the company, and he was faced with either going to being brought to the authorities with this or turning over the convention to the board of directors entirely, and he walks away from it. So you can guess which option he took, because he's not in jail right now.
Yeah.
So he's actually now working with Anime North. Big surprise. But it's these types of people that they overlook their own problems, but they hone in and they attack everyone else that they don't like. And this is really what it comes down to. Whereas politics is a part of that, because if they're staunchly liberal, then they will go after people who are conservative just because they're conservative. There's no reason for it. There's no like logic behind it. It's just they are absolute psychopaths.
And you know what? This is perhaps sometimes conservatives, they do themselves a disservice, but the only way the only way we can say that Vic Mignogna was ever attacked for his politics is by inference only, because he's
Yeah.
never ever publicly stated such a thing, and he wouldn't. He's not that type of person.
I
And
think he supported Trump once publicly.
possibly, and you know what? It might have just slipped out. I bet it was unintentional. I don't even know the context. I'm just gonna bet it was. Um, he might have been like privately when he talks to people he thought it was his friends. He's like, "Yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in conservatism. I might vote for
Mhm.
this guy, right?" Or and you've been in this space, so there will often be conversations about how this person is like completely racist and a sexist and homophobic, and he should just like go in a pit and die, and they'll just casually talk about this,
Yep,
not realizing that maybe there was someone who actually voted for that person standing around you.
exactly. Well, I mean, look at one of the highest profile ones I think in fandom that you could point to is Five Nights at Freddy's. Look at Scott Cawthon.
Yes, Scott Cawthon.
Like, I actually emailed Scott Cawthon after all that shit went down and like voiced my support and all that stuff, and he actually took the time to reply to me and thanked me for all that too. But like, he's
Isn't
a
it
down to earth
ironic?
dude.
Those are the most polite people. Isn't it
Yeah,
ironic, right? The
it's so
the person
strange.
who gets held out as, well, you hold these beliefs, so you got to be, this and this and this and this, and you're like, hey, that really sucked what you went through, and they take the time to be like, yeah, I appreciate the support.
Yeah, and
Isn't
he's a
it
very down to
ironic?
earth dude. He's a very down to earth dude, funny guy. And like the bottom line is like he's getting attacked because he donated to a Republican
Yeah,
that
Notch.
was like homophobic or something like that. But like
Notch had something similar, didn't he? The creator of Minecraft.
Yeah.
He basically got bought out and told to pound sand over his politics. I think
Yeah.
he had the same thing that oh man, now I'm blanking on exactly what he said that got him in the hot water. I want to say it was very similar to what oh man, I'm bad with names today. The Harry Potter woman.
Oh, Rowling, J.K. Rowling.
Rowling, J.K. Rowling. Yeah, I think it was very similar in vein to what she had said, right? Which, if you actually go look up the real quote, not someone's editorialization of it,
Mhm.
if you look up the real quote, you're like, oh, that's not, it's not a terribly out of line thing to say. But to hear other people talk about it, you feel like they literally took out a gun and shot someone.
Oh, yeah. No, and
So,
as far as I knew, like, Scott donated to someone who had some kind of transphobic view or something like that, and he's like, "I didn't even know that they said that." He's like, I just donated for them because they are positive on this policy I like." And it's it's
yeah,
literally it, like,
Rowling could buy the
it's
police department
this
and trust.
lunacy of people, they just cannot
Yeah.
let their freaking politics go, and they just have to push it on everybody. It's crazy.
And I mean, look, I don't typically talk politics in a workplace unless I'm really comfortable with the other person, you know, um, talking about it too.
Yeah.
Um, I just think that it's such a, and it's to be perfectly honest, I've worked in trades and industrial zones before.
Mhm.
Um, the casual conversation can definitely lean to the right side of the political scale. And so I'm not going to say it's a phenomenon that's entirely confined to just, fandoms, conventions, and whatnot. Um, it's the what happens when someone who disagrees with you enters the picture,
Right.
right? And so, I'll give a specific example here. It's not, I mean, no one's going to know the context on this, but there's been some racist talk regarding Native Americans as First Nations people in an
Mhm.
industrial work site I was at. I never took it personally because they weren't going after me, right? They're not like, "Hey, you, I think you're this and this and this." They were just kind of
Yeah.
talking in general, like, oh, "I had my truck broken into, fucking, whatever."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I, rather than make a big deal out of it, rather than like going up, storming up to the person during the lunch break and being like, "What did you mean when you said blah 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 blah?" Just like I just got to pipe up in the back. I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then I'll sometimes pile on too because yeah, the person who broke into your truck is an asshole.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's the proper way, the adult way to deal with it. But then you look at the case, again, speculative, but you look at Vic, where he's like, he goes to work and these people are bashing the people that he agrees with politically, or even Doug TenNapel would be a more appropriate example, who has
Absolutely,
always
yep.
been very public with his political beliefs, right?
Mhm.
Where Doug TenNapel is going to work and he hears people like bashing all of the people he votes for, and he says, "Hold on a second, guys. Like these are the people I believe in, and I think you're talking. The way you're talking about it is not accurate. It's not reflecting reality." And the
Mhm.
reaction is, "Get out of the industry."
Exactly. Because they can't handle number 1, it comes down to they're threatened by they're threatened by the person, right? Whether they're better than them or they're jealous of where they are in the stature and whatever else. Because you're not allowed to have like a legendary stature in an industry and be someone I don't like. Like that's
Yeah.
their viewpoint, right?
I give you the perfect example of going the other way. Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey's movies are amazing, and I'll watch them every time.
Hmm.
Right, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, even his more recent stuff. After he said all the things he did about Trump, I don't give a shit. I will watch Sonic 100 times. It was a
Yeah.
fun movie.
Exactly.
And his Dr. Robotnik is perfect. When I
It is.
said, okay,
Yep.
I want someone to play Dr. Robotnik who is 100% over the top, bought into the character.
Hmm.
And they said, and of course I see Jim Carrey dressed up as Dr. Robotnik in the movie trailer, and I'm like, that's perfect. I am a huge fan of his as an actor. I
Yep.
can separate the art from the artist.
Exactly. And he's not going to be your representative at any point in time, so
No,
it doesn't matter.
no, and me liking his movie doesn't say anything about my politics.
No,
So
exactly.
why do I have a problem? Why would anyone have a problem with that? But then say someone goes and says, "Well, I'm not going to watch Full Metal Alchemist because I know Vic was in it." I'm like, "That's a really, really good anime. You are missing out on some quality storytelling."
Exactly. And a quality individual. I mean, you don't have to hang out with him, but like he's not a bad person.
Yeah, if you ever watch his Twitch streams when he interacts with his fans, you can tell he is exactly the opposite of Ryan Haywood. Speaking of which, did you hear Rooster Teeth shut down?
I did. Yeah, rest in
Uh,
piss for that one.
yeah. Oh, it's just so in the context of what the Ryan Haywood issue was, it makes them firing Vic. And we saw this all came out in court. We saw the emails, we saw the depositions, right? These are
Yep.
all indisputable facts. What they fired Vic over, what Monica did by contacting, I think it was Matt Hullum,
Hmm.
um, the what she said, and that directly led to his dismissal, knowing that the entire time there was a legitimate sexual predator working in that office.
Right.
And the fact that the issue, again, everything is political, and I'm definitely going to politicize this 100%. But the fact that you can do such perfect double speak in such a short amount of time, because again, this was not rooted in any principle.
Hmm.
Vic's firing wasn't, well, we want to be overly cautious because a lot of our fans are very young. Okay, so you were cautious when it came to Vic, but not literally anyone else.
Of
When
course,
the
because
most
they're yeah,
basics of cautions would have caught Ryan's behavior because he was doing this while he was working.
of course. Because the politics lined up. The things that they enjoy doing together lined up.
And honestly, there was a trans. Actually, this is. Are you familiar with? I believe the individual's name is Carrie, but Caden. Caden. There was a trans individual who came out while they were working at Rooster Teeth, and I forget. I forget if it was a male to female or female to male because I didn't know this person
Hmm.
in their content. I didn't watch that content. Um, but Caden talked about how they were given the F slur as a nickname in the company.
Oh, what a
And
lovely,
then they
lovely time.
the Rooster Teeth employees couldn't say the F slur on their broadcasts, so they covered it up with a code word and used that as the nickname for that individual, to the point where fans would come up to this person and call them that nickname.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, Caden. If you just look up Rooster Teeth Caden, Kdin, if you look that up, Caden made a Tumblr post about it. This was several years ago. I think it was after the Ryan Haywood stuff, but I don't entirely remember. But I know it was, and then there was, I believe, a black woman who had come out with her allegations of workplace racism, and I'm like, there is no way that Matt Hullum did not know about all this stuff going on.
Of course he did. It was the right people doing it.
But then, of course, Vic Mignogna was your sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, because he's the easiest one to get rid of, right? He's the big bad conservative Christian guy.
And honestly, like I would say I have a pretty good, I used to be a big Rooster Teeth fan for, the Let's Play crew, right? So Jeff Ramsey,
Mhm.
Jack Patillo, Ryan Haywood, Jeremy Dooley, Michael Jones, um, that kind of like original crew, Ray Navarez, before he left. Um, that kind of that original Let's Play crew. I used to consume a ton of their content, and I'm a huge fan of Red versus Blue. I have the box set.
Nice. That's awesome.
So, like, coming at this from a fan, from the fan perspective, um, I would say it had a pretty good finger on the pulse of their political bent. Most of
Mhm.
them were fairly progressive in political opinion. Um, Jeff Ramsey, in particular, has never been shy about his politics. He's certainly, my guess would be that he occupies a moderately left side of the spectrum.
Mhm.
I've always thought that Jack Patillo was like slightly Republican, but kind of like the Rhino Republican.
Yeah.
Um, And then the younger people are probably mostly apolitical, with possibly, they believe in, like, progressive issues, but they don't really identify with a political movement. But also knowing that Jeff Ramsey and Matt Hollum and dang it, what's the other guy, Bernie Burns, um, they all started this as like a frat.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of guys who were like, hey, we're young college age guys, we're gonna start this project together. And I think that identity never left the company.
No, of course.
And so when they're hiring people that kind of slot into this, you got to be a member of the frat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't attribute it to maliciousness, but it absolutely is. You fired your Christian good boy out of your frat club because he wasn't frat enough. I mean, that was my take on it, anyways. And then, of
That's what
course,
it looked
then the
like.
the
Yeah.
Ryan stuff comes out, and I'm like, okay, well, now I know 100% for sure that you fired Vic because of politics and not because of any concerning behavior
Of course. Of
that did
course.
not align with your company values. So when you say, hey, Vic doesn't align with our company values, that was pure horseshit.
Well, I mean, they doesn't because he's Christian. I mean, he's
No, but the
conservative.
reason, right? The reasoning, like, hey, we're firing him because he
Yeah.
doesn't align with our values, and we want to make sure. I forget do you remember the
No,
exact wording of the statement they gave?
that's the bullshit that they spewed.
Exactly.
Bullshit
It
PR
was.
speak.
We now know that to be 100% false.
Of
Not
course.
even like 95% false. It's 100% false. Again, by
Of course.
rational inference, you cannot tell me that all of these individuals who have been outed for having this, like, what they did to Caden shocks even me.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
wouldn't act like that in
crazy.
the workplace.
No, of
Like,
course not.
literally calling someone the F slur as an inside joke.
That's so stupid.
Again, I
I
am
can't.
assuming that what they're saying is true. I guess no one's ever, no third party has ever come and validated those claims.
Yeah.
But I do find the claims to be highly credible.
It
So I guess
sounds
that
like something
caveat,
that would happen. It's
right?
hard to say, but it's just like I wouldn't be surprised. I'll say
So
that.
I mean, that was a long tangent to get to the idea that the politics of the fandom. There's nothing wrong with bringing politics into the workplace because it is a part of who you are. But you got to know there's a time and a place, and you have to be 100% fully prepared to say,
And
well, this person doesn't agree with me, but I can still work with them.
and you have to understand that regardless of which side of the political fence that you vote on, you still enjoy the same damn thing, and that's why you're there. That's why you're at a convention, because you all enjoy the thing that you're there for. So what the hell does it matter if a person votes for Trump or votes for Trudeau or votes for uh, you know random person?
This statement,
Yeah, exactly.
this statement right here. There are so many people who think that this statement does not apply to them. If you think this statement does not apply to you, it definitely applies to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you got to think is you're going to a Star Trek convention because you enjoy Star Trek. Everyone that's there enjoys Star Trek, regardless of if they like Elon Musk, if they hate Elon Musk, if they voted for Trump, if they hate Trump, if they, join the convoy, if they didn't. They're there because they enjoy Star Trek. They're not there because they want to make your time bad. That's what people fail to realize. And it's like this gatekeeping nonsense of like worrying about whatever everybody else is doing. That doesn't matter. You're there for one thing. Go and enjoy it.
Looking at you there, Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, right? Good grief.
It's anyways. I think we've covered all of the topics. Was there? I'll give the last sort of monologue over to you, Grum, if you want to cover something that we didn't get to.
No, I think we've covered quite a bit here. I mean, there's always more to talk about, but on all honesty, it's just like for people out there that are worried about things, right? And I'll put this one out there for trans folks. if you want people to take you seriously and you want people to understand who you are, then you have to define who you are. You have to
Mhm.
find what defines you. You being trans just can't be everything that you are, right?
Or
As
your alphabet of mental disorders.
that's what I'm saying. It's just one of these things. It's like it goes across the board. It's if you're a Trump supporter, don't let that just be your entire identity. If you're a
Yeah.
liberal, don't let that be your identity. Like be interesting. If you want people to care about you and treat you with respect, be interesting.
Being
And
diagnosed with bipolarism is not a personality trait.
no,
It's a
it isn't.
personality disorder. It's not a
Yeah.
personality trait.
And like, being like, oh, I'm disabled, I'm this, I'm that. Okay, well, that's fine, but there's more to you than just that.
Yeah,
There's
okay, you're disabled. Is there something you need me to do?
right,
Am I walking too fast? Right? Do you have issues with your musculoskeletal development? Do I need to slow down and not walk as fast?
right,
Does it hurt you to keep up with me? Do is there some is have you changed your name? Is there something that I can refer to you as that makes you feel comfortable in your own skin that doesn't conflict with the things I believe in? Like if you
right.
if you just want to walk up to me and say, "I demand that you call me this." I'm sorry, I don't have any context. Um I okay. I guess I will believe you by default, but I'm don't get mad at me if next time I meet you and I don't remember.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like if you because obviously there's a bunch
Oh,
of different
oh, we need a sarcasm tag on that comment.
like obviously like if you are presenting in a way that is non-traditional, you have to realize that you're going to have to either explain yourself or endure. There's no way around it because it's at the end of the day, people don't assume. Like when I'm at work, 99% of people address me as she, her without ever talking to me. And then when I talk to them, there's a small percentage of people that are shocked because my voice doesn't match my looks. And but most people don't care because at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter like
Yeah.
what bathroom I
Are you
use.
threatened? So you talked a lot about your
Yeah,
journey as to how you accepted who you truly are inside. Is that
absolutely.
threatened by some random stranger saying, "Well, I don't think you're a woman."
Absolutely not.
Nope. Just like me being Native
Absolutely.
American is not threatened. Like if someone says, "Well, you don't look white in that camera filter," or sorry, you look white in that camera filter, I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to give back my status card." Oh,
Exactly. It's like that's the entire thing. It's like you identify who you are. You like each
yeah.
individual person identifies who they are, whether that's like through one means or another. Like, I have a status card. I'm Métis. I'm Irish. And all this other stuff too. But I'm not gonna be like, oh, this is my identity. No, I'm just that's a part of my identity. That's a
You
part
know
of
what,
who I
Crumb?
am, but that's not all of who I am.
You're not drunk right now. You're not a real Irish person.
Exactly. It's true.
Yeah. So,
Sad.
I mean, again, if the external validation is a requisite for your internal validation, that is a problem.
That is a
And
huge problem.
I highly recommend you reach out to a professional.
Absolutely. That should be where people start looking. It's like if you require everyone else to validate who you are, then that is problem number 1 that needs to get solved.
I need to put that
Because
on a
if
t-shirt. That was a great line. That was a great one-liner, man. I got to put that on a t-shirt. Everything is political branded t-shirts coming sometime in 2037.
there you go. But it's honestly like if you can't even stand up for who you are, then how do you expect anyone else to believe it at the end of the day?
And it really isn't as complicated as trying to figure everything out.
No.
It's not even close to that. And it could change too. Like
It does change.
there is not going to be one single person who ever says, "Well, man, you used to be like this when you were a kid. Now I don't know what to do with you. Like
Exactly.
I'm going to stop being your friend because you something about you changed."
Exactly.
And that is like again, this imposition that you put on random strangers is even more weird because very few people would put this imposition on their friends,
Right?
right? Like I have friends from my
Exactly.
childhood I still sometimes talk to.
Yeah.
I definitely have a lot of friends in Calgary that chat with every now and then. We'll go out for beers or whatever, and I have changed. I hope that I have changed a little bit since I was 18,
Yeah. People
and
grow, people
yeah,
change.
and I think it's more common with men than it is with women. Men can spend 20 years apart and just pick up where they left off the minute
Yeah,
they meet.
it's
I think that's
true.
more common with men, but still, to me, it's such a foreign concept to say look at someone who said, "Well, I thought I was this kind of person, but now I want to be this kind of person," and to have any negative reaction to that. Just it's a foreign concept to me.
Well, and going back to your favorite actor, Jim Carrey, he had a very interesting talk and discussion about it, about depression. And he said that depression for him is like a deep rest. Like he needs to take a break from the person that he's being. And it's like because he's always had different personalities, and he's like, that personality was fun. Is like, but this is giving me like, I'm tired of this now. I need to be something else. I need to be somebody else. And so like that's how he looks at these different characters, gives him a chance to be somebody else so he doesn't go through that. I highly recommend it. I'm not doing it justice because he does a really good job of explaining it, but it's people change. People change and
Sometimes they're hetero-flexible.
exactly.
Shout out to Jack Murphy.
Exactly.
But that's the thing too. Like someone like Jack Murphy, who he got exposed as being a complete fraud, right?
Mhm. Oh, yes.
Except, as literally everyone covered, everyone knew he was a fraud from the start. He didn't change who he was over the years, being this like life coach. I mean, he tried to bury his past, but that was always him. That was the real person. Life coaches are
Exactly.
probably the among the fakest people that are out there.
Oh, 100%. And
And
to your point, Brett,
all of them
there,
equally, right? Like, yeah, there are life
exactly.
coaches that I do respect. Not not Andrew Tate. I don't know if he's ever held himself out as a life coach. Coach Red Pill, no, no, not my cup of tea. But like Coach Greg Adams, I've watched a little bit of his content, and I'm like, okay, I mean, I get it. You're selling books. That's what you're
Yeah,
doing. You are marketing a brand. That is not something I'm going to latch onto and say this is a personality that I identify with, because that corporate brand is not a personality.
exactly.
Same with Jim
But
Carrey. Him being an actor is not his personality.
no,
Anything he
exactly.
does in a movie is a marketing brand,
Mhm.
and that is something that I can enjoy. I can consume it as entertainment media. But if I start saying I want to be like I strongly identify with Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, and I'm going to base my personality off him. I
Yeah, some
mean,
people do it
to me,
though.
yes,
But
and it's
at the
unhealthy.
end of the day, and like Brett points out, it's like tortured mind or brilliant actor. It is both. But the fact of the matter is he's still alive. Whereas somebody who is as beloved as Robin Williams
Robin
couldn't
Williams.
handle it.
Yep.
Couldn't handle it anymore.
Well, and you have to wonder too, because I don't know the Robin Williams political situation very well.
Mhm.
Um, but perhaps because he was on the wrong side of that political aisle, was he not able to find the friends that he needed in the moment? I mean, of course, he went through that very ugly, nasty divorce, right?
He had a very, very rough life behind the scenes. And he never let that go through because he always had to come off as happy and whatever else, because that's he wanted that memory for his daughter, right? He wanted that to be the legacy that carried on. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you can only do that so long. You can only keep
Chester,
going.
you remember
Chester.
the frontman
Yeah.
for Lincoln Park, right? Chester
Yeah.
Bennington.
Exactly.
His wife showed the last video of him alive playing with his kids,
Yeah.
and to the to any person who's never been in that dark place, it's very difficult to understand why someone who smiles and looks happy in that moment could do what he did
Mhm.
with the full knowledge, like, hey, I have kids and a wife, and I'm leaving them behind when I do this.
Yeah, because there's no
Um,
other option for them at that point.
yeah,
It's just
but
absolute abject hopelessness.
I know one thing. When I saw that video, I kind of looked into his eyes and I said, I see some pain in those eyes.
Absolutely.
I see actually a lot of pain in those eyes.
Absolutely.
But again, because I've looked into my own eyes and saw something similar way back in the day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think I got into a little bit about this with Steve Gosney in episode 1 as well, but it's not always been an easy life to live. I don't think any life ever is. And my struggles over the years, or actually, it was a relatively short time period. The
Mhm.
proudest moment for me is that I was able to pull myself out of it and talk candidly about it to this day.
Absolutely.
And I don't think, and I truly believe this, I don't think it ever goes away. Once you've had that dark feeling, you'll
Mhm.
never fully get rid of it, but you learn to live with it, right? It's just like any other
Mhm.
disability, right? This is a mental disability, but it's just like any other disability. You adapt, you survive. It's what the human brain and body does the best.
Exactly. No,
So,
it's when I reach that point too, it's the same thing. You find the strength in you because it's only you and yourself, that's it. And
yeah.
you find the strength to turn around and be like, "No, I'm not doing that." But I
And
can
sometimes,
understand. It's so alluring to be like, "This is gonna solve my problems. I'm going to remove the problems from everybody else's life, blah,
yeah.
blah, blah." It's like it's so alluring for that, and I can understand, like, a Robin Williams or a Chester Bennington going through it because it's like they honestly convinced themselves that there was no other option, and it sucks.
Yeah. And sometimes, there's certainly a percentage of people who say, I'm the problem. I'm just taking
Yeah,
myself out of the equation,
exactly.
right?
Because, like, I'm
Um,
sure that I don't know it from Chester's music and stuff, I don't know his history, but he seemed to have a rocky history with his family.
yeah.
And I can speculate that when he's playing with his kids and he's seeing how happy that his kids are at that moment, he just doesn't want to turn out like, the fear of turning out of what his family and what his father or whoever did to him superseded him staying there for them.
Well, look at Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Um, and now there's, for those who don't know, I mean, he had a very, very rough, or Eminem too, right? Growing up
Mhm.
with his mother in the trailer.
Yeah.
Um, right. Those lyrics come from somewhere.
They come from
They they
somewhere,
they come
absolutely.
from somewhere. They 100% do. You can learn a lot about a musician and what is inside their heart by just looking at the lyrics.
Mhm.
Um, that's probably one of the exceptions to the, like, everything's a front, everything's a brand. That's probably one of the few exceptions. Um, I would say the realest form of entertainment is song lyrics.
Oh, of course.
Um,
100%.
anyways, the point I'm getting to was Billy Corgan's brother claims that their father molested them or molested him when he was a kid, but
Mhm.
Billy Corgan has denied that. Um, or he's at least said, like, my dad never molested me. I've never seen him molest my brother, right? And so it's kind of like an unresolved question as to whether that actually happened or not.
Mhm.
But you even if you just take that it's possibly true, he clearly did not have a good relationship with his father growing up. There was absolutely confirmed allegations of psychological and physical abuse,
Mhm.
and for someone who's gone through that to have not taken themselves out, and you look at, okay, so what Robin Williams went through, what Chester Bennington went through, what Billy Corgan went through, why is one alive and why is one not? I've always seen that as you're asking the wrong question,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Because the decision or the desire, the will to live is I mean, it is your most primal instinct above everything else,
Mhm.
right? Um your single individual will to live, it's the single biggest thing to overcome. And so those who have overcome it have accomplished something that those who have not. And so I'm not going as far as to say that, getting to a pretty dark topic right now, but to have completed that process doesn't make you brave. I'm not going to go that far
No.
and make that
No.
statement, right? Because everyone is an individual. But I
Exactly.
do know that hesitation is a thing. I do know psychologically, every muscle in your body will tell you to stop.
Yeah.
To those who successfully do it, and I've had a friend take his own life before, to those who successfully do it, they had to overcome the single most primal instinct, and that tells me, that's evidence to me that they wanted it really badly, really,
Exactly.
really badly.
Exactly. And that's
So,
I mean, to loop it back around to what we're talking about, is that a decision that you want a 12-year-old to be have agency over,
mhm.
right?
Yes, we're talking about a decision that is almost as permanent.
Almost as permanent, almost as damaging. Is that a decision that you want someone who's not even experienced life yet to make?
And don't get me wrong, do you remember the news article about the First Nations Reserve way up in far northern Ontario, where they had to declare a crisis because they had like it was like four or five children in the span of 2 weeks took their own lives, and the
Yeah,
oldest one was 13.
yeah.
Um,
It's wild.
you're talking about a decision at that par of consequences,
Yeah.
and no one, absolutely no one, would have said that that was the correct decision.
No, of course.
And yet we're now saying, all right, but you can make this decision.
You can make this life altering decision that's
Yeah,
going to completely derail.
don't make that decision. Don't make the decision that ends it, but do make this decision that virtually ends it.
Exactly.
At least you'll not be the same person after as you were before,
Right.
right? So, I mean, in a way, it is, it is, in a metaphorical way, the death of someone.
Technically is, yeah.
So, I mean, in the community, they call it dead naming. That
Yeah.
that word is not, I wouldn't say that the word is hyperbolic. The whole point is, this old person, this former person I was, is now dead. I'm this new person now.
Yeah. And it happens outside of the trans community too. I mean, there's plenty of times where people just up and leave and make a new life somewhere else, like
Oh
that's
yeah.
happens
Oh,
all the
the
time.
the what is it? Going out for milk and cigarettes kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I had, according to some my great grandfather did that to his family at some point.
Mhm. People do it
Just
all
went
the
out
time.
for
It
milk and
doesn't
cigarettes,
doesn't
never returned.
doesn't need to be, you don't need to be trans to do it.
No,
It's
and I mean, sometimes, again, this is the highly individualized experience,
yeah,
because there is something in your brain that says what is currently reality is not right.
exactly.
But it is right now. It's not right. Something's got to change.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just as simple as doing a career change, right? Look at a
exactly.
look
Yeah.
at a former IT guy, political analyst, who's now trying to become a lawyer. Who would
Mhm.
have thought that career trajectory, when I was 18? Would have thought that would have been my career trajectory.
Yeah.
But
You're 100% correct. Yeah.
again, the consequences of those decisions, they are serious. They are also on a scale, right? We're
Yeah.
talking the most severe of the consequences, and we're slowly coming down as the decision is less permanent. I
Yeah.
could always go back to being an IT guy. I mean, the
Exactly.
money I spent on law school, I'll never get that back, so it is consequential. The years that I've spent here are consequential, but it's not permanent. I can absolutely undo it and go back to being an IT guy.
Exactly. And
But
there's
there
nothing
was a
stopping you
reason
from
I
doing
wanted
both,
to
but
change, and that reason is still true to this day.
yeah. So
So,
it's just it's personal choices, and at the end of the day, it's no one, it's not really affecting anybody but you, right? At the end of the day, for myself,
yeah,
being trans is not really affecting anybody but me. Like my family might have an opinion on certain things, but at the same time, it's like, well, if you wanted to have more of an influence on my decisions about things, then maybe you should have done things differently too.
yeah, maybe if you want an influence on how I decide things, maybe you should have been an influence on my life,
Exactly.
a good influence on my
A
life.
good influence on my life. Exactly.
So,
But
you know, isn't it weird, the people that we look to? Um, for me, it was coaches when I was in minor leagues.
mhm.
The people that you look to for that kind of advice. The best piece of advice I ever got that I never followed. was from my high school guidance counselor, and I really should have followed it. I think my life would have gone very differently if I did.
Mhm.
Probably for the better. But at the same time, I can't really say that's the life I wish I had now because who knows, right? You can't
Exactly.
really say like I wish everything was different because you'll get your wish and suddenly you realize that 26 years ago you died in a car crash.
Yeah,
Right? So you're here
exactly.
today, that's what matters.
You're here
That's
today, you got to the point that you're at now, and you have all the tools because of it. Like, there's tons of shit that's happened in my life, bad stuff that's happened in my life. Lots of really terrible things, but if I had a chance to go back and change it, would I? No, because I'm comfortable and happy where I am, and I'm successful where I am. So, like, that's it. You take the good with the bad at the end of the
Mhm.
day, and you
Yeah,
have
that's
to be
when
allowed to make mistakes.
that's you talked earlier about people going after you on like social media and that
Mhm.
for the opinions you've expressed over the years. It's one of the best defenses to that kind of BS
Absolutely.
is you know what? I can turn a computer off. There are people who need to turn their computer off for a week.
Yes.
Those of us who are able to do that, you know, man, I've lived out in the mountains for 2 weeks at a time without having access to a any type of internet or cell signal.
Mhm.
So, yeah, the best defense to any of that stuff is to turn the computer off and just go live your life,
Exactly.
right?
Be
They
successful,
always
be
say,
happy.
right, success is the ultimate revenge.
Yeah, 100%.
And I mean, I wouldn't say I'm successful yet, but man, I made it to law school. They don't, you know, that
That's pretty
is
damn
an
impressive.
accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, that's pretty
I
damn
know
impressive.
I know because the dean said we get this many applications, we reject 90% of them.
Yeah.
I am the 10%. That's pretty damn successful if I say so
That
myself.
is pretty damn successful, yeah.
So, and yeah, for those who would think that I'm the diversity hire, definitely not. You know, and the reason I know this is because the admissions process for law school is that you have to be first rejected to get reconsideration under your DEI credentials, which
Hmm,
sucks that those exist. But I didn't get rejected. I was unconditionally accepted on the first round of offers.
that's awesome.
So,
Good friggin'
and
work.
again, it was hard work. I studied for my LSAT.
Mhm.
I got I got what I consider to be a good result in the LSAT. The law school agreed with me. My undergraduate GPA was also very high.
There you go.
So I gave them no reason to say, well, we don't want this person in our school.
Exactly. Oh, good job.
So a little bit of tooting the old self horn there. But again, you know, everyone defines success differently, and your the definition of success changes day to day, and that's how you know when you get into yourself into a rut when the grind of going to law school gets really wearing on you. Um, how I keep going is just you know, man, think of how much I had to sacrifice, how much I had to accomplish to be here. I really shouldn't be complaining that much. Hell, I could have died of a blood clot 3 years ago.
Exactly.
So at this
Just
point,
waking
every
up in
day
the
I
morning
live
is a
past
success.
laying in ICU in a hospital in Calgary is
Yeah,
bonus.
exactly. And
So
that's the nugget of wisdom that some people gain and some people can never get.
and the biggest tragedy to me is that you will encounter someone who's 15 years old who's never heard anything like that in their life.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
because I've through political activism, you often get like you know how students have to do like so many hours of community service.
Yeah.
So volunteering for politicians is one of the most common ways they do that because well, a political campaign never has a starvation of volunteer resources.
True.
So yeah, if they need their 40 or 60 or 80 hours or whatever it is nowadays, they'll come out to political campaigns. So I get a chance to talk with them because I'm training them for whatever they're I find that they're really good on the computers when all of the older political activists are best on the doors talking to people, right?
Mhm,
The young
mhm.
kids do not talk to people door to door.
No,
So
that would be a train
I
wreck.
yeah, I train them in the office and they handle like data entry and computer work and whatever. And so you know you get to talk to them whenever there's a lull. And often I'm just like, I just want to know what is your world right now when
Yep.
you're that age. And apparently it's anime and Minecraft. Or
Yep.
sorry, Roblox. Now it's Roblox. Used to be
Roblox.
Minecraft, now it's Roblox and Fortnite.
Roblox
Um
and Fortnite. Yep.
Roblox, Fortnite, and anime. The
Hmm.
amount of like high school kids who actually watch anime and violent animes too is kind of disturbing, but also encouraging. I don't know if
Yeah.
it could be both at the same time. But again, and of course, in natural conversation with them, and you just happen to say, "Well, have you guys thought about what you're going to do when you finish high school?" And they're like, "Yeah, I want to be a streamer like Mr. Beast."
Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
That's the way
okay.
it goes.
All right. So, what's the backup plan when that doesn't work? Well, it's going to work. Why? Because I want it to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, we're gonna have a
Yeah.
chat. We're gonna have a quick chat, and I tell them the same thing that I was always told growing up. The backup plan doesn't have to be that well thought out, but it has to have been considered for more than 5 minutes.
Exactly.
What do you like doing when you're not on the computer? Right. And some of these I guess when you're in the conservative political side of the things, a lot of the kids do have families, fairly stable households.
Hmm.
Um, so what do you like doing with your dad? That's not always an appropriate question if you get my meaning. But you know, and just go from there. Like wherever that conversation happens to go. Wait, you really love anime. Are you good at drawing? I've met some young people with absolute like drop dead beautiful art skills.
Hmm.
And I can't imagine a world where that art never gets to see the light of day.
Right.
Like please draw for someone, something, because you are really good at this stuff.
Hmm.
And I've met people that they like working on their dad's car.
Yeah.
Think of just how stereotypical like 80s America that was.
Right.
Right? Working on your car, working on the car with your dad. That's still a thing to this day.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember doing this with my stepfather. Right, go get this wrench. Of course, I never brought the right wrench because I'm a computer guy. No. Oh my!
That's why you're a lawyer now.
Crump, let me tell you. Let me tell you something, Crump. Do you know how long it took for me to figure out that the flat screwdriver was not the Robertson,
Oh my God.
the square screwdriver?
Yeah.
Because when he
Yeah.
said flat, I just assumed when you look at it head on, the tip, the very end of it is flat. So when
Aw.
my stepdad, maybe that's why my stepdad, threw us out of the house. Maybe he got sick of me bringing the wrong screwdriver. I remember the time he told me to go get the left-handed screwdriver.
Oh, that's
Now
just
I am
mean.
left-handed.
That's just mean.
Yeah, I figured it out. Credit to me, I figured it out. But I am ashamed to admit it did take a minute of me like holding the screwdrivers in both hands, being like, okay, which one feels right?
Oh no.
Now, my stepdad he was a mechanic. That was his trade, right? So the amount of tools he had was ridiculous.
Hmm.
So in my defense, he had a lot of screwdrivers. And that was the thing too. Like he was the easiest person to buy for like Father's Day and his birthday and Christmas. Just get him another set of tools. Because
Hmm.
in his job, he'd like constantly break his tools.
Hmm.
So just
Constantly go through it.
yeah, go to like Canadian Tire, just like pick a random thing off the tool shelf and just be like put a bow tie on it. Honestly, and I it was funny because over the years as he broke and we replaced various tools, you could see the mismatch of like, oh yeah, I bought that for you in 94.
That's
I bought
great.
that set of screwdrivers was bought in 94, that set was bought in 98, that set was bought in 2004. As they're getting mixed and matched, but again, like if those are the stories that you have in your childhood,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate that there's a lot of kids who never get that connection that says, hey, you can turn that into making money.
exactly.
Me, I
and they
loved
just
working
they
with
don't.
computers ever since the era I grew up in was like the heyday of computing, right? The
Mhm.
internet was invented in 89. It became like very it started breaking into the mainstream around 94, 95. The release of Windows 98 was probably the beginning of the meteoric rise of Microsoft.
Yes. Yeah.
Um so I that was like perfect like line of growing up. And so in the late 90s, when I was old enough to start tearing apart computers, and you gotta imagine like this little this little 8-year-old ripping apart a computer and putting it back together. It would have been just like in the 70s or 80s, a kid taking apart like a snowmobile or a four-wheeler and putting it
Mhm.
back together, right?
Exactly.
Same thing. Now, my stepdad and my mother never they didn't know how computers worked. To them, it was a miracle that I knew how this stuff worked. That was the career I pursued.
Yep.
My very first like official job, I threw newspapers when I was a younger teen, but that I wouldn't consider that a real job. It was just like I got paid per newspaper. There was like a set rate,
There you go. Mhm.
and so I just ran down the street and threw them at all the doors, and I made $20.
Hey.
But the first real job I got, where I was actually signing paychecks worth hundreds of dollars. Let me tell you, Crum. Do you remember the very first time you signed a check that was over $1,000?
It was probably for rent. If
No,
I
no, no.
remember
Not
recall
the
correctly.
not the front, the back.
Oh,
Like
the
to
back.
cash it, to cash it.
Cash it. Uh,
The first
I
time
don't
you
know if I've
you
ever
cashed
I
a
don't know
check
if I've
over a
ever
thousand.
had a if I don't know if I've ever had to cash a check for 1,000, to be honest. At that point, I was getting a direct deposit.
I've Okay, so same thing, right? You remember the
Yeah.
first time, like
Oh,
and if you're
yeah.
paid every 2 weeks, obviously two direct deposits, right? Over $1,000. I got paid monthly,
Mhm.
so um, but the feeling of the first check, I remember this quite clearly because I had to open the bank account. I've been with the same bank since I was a very, very young kid. But I remember when I had to like up the limits in my bank account to graduate from like the little kid savings account to like
Mhm.
actual a checking account
Mhm.
so that I can cash this first paycheck I got for $1,297.
Jeez.
And I just remember being like, I am a god. All of you bow before me because I have $1,000. I was
Yeah.
15 years old.
Yeah.
I was 15 years old when I cashed my first $1,000 paycheck, and
That's
the
impressive.
amount of the amount of pride that you have in that,
Mhm.
because I was doing the job that I've always loved doing, and that's working with computers and technology.
Exactly.
And
That's the important part.
just to bring a very long story back to its fruition, um, what I tell young kids today is I find the thing that you enjoy doing, just to keep yourself busy. Right when you get off the electronics because you're bored of constantly getting eliminated in Fortnite. Um, what do you go do when you're outside? What do you go do when you're in town? All right, here's how you can turn that into a job. Start there. You don't necessarily have to finish in that role, but that's where you start.
Mhm.
1297. Remember that number. I will always remember that number, 1297. It is not my PIN code. Don't try it. It's not my PIN number. Don't no one get a hold of my credit card and try that. Um, but yeah, 1297 is it's a number that I think I will engrave on my wedding ring or something,
There you go.
because that number was the start of everything for me. And at the time, that the year I turned 15 was tumultuous, and that's putting it very lightly.
Mhm.
A lot of really bad things happened that year, not the least of which was the death of my grandmother that I was very close to. Um, so, and even worse things than that. So just having that outlet, that escape, and going from that like high point to the low point right after, and then another high
Yeah.
point after that. I remember during that job, I got interviewed on a local TV show because the job I was doing was so like impactful in the community
That's
that
awesome.
a like journalist wanted to chat with me. They're like, "Oh, you're one of the student interns working at this project. What do you think about it?" And I'm like, why do you want my opinion? I just talked about they asked me some of the I think it was the most random question like, oh, what do you do, what do you do in your spare time? And not having a good answer, I was just like, oh, I like to I like to listen to music, play video games. And they clipped that part.
Of
They
course.
clipped that part and threw it up on like a montage of like all of the people talking about um how the project impacted them. And I'm just like, of all the things I said in that interview, that's what you went with. Well, whatever. But that was the first time I was ever on a TV camera, and let me tell you, that's I mean, oh, try it. Everyone should try it once before they're 18. Go on a TV camera because nothing you can say can be held against you.
Exactly.
But anyways, Crum, I've been going too long here. What do you got? What do you got? Please say something.
Oh, I've got nothing. I think we've talked a lot about a bunch of different stuff, and I'm sure we could talk for hours more.
We
It's
will.
been it's been
You're
great. It's been a great
absolutely we'll
chat.
have you back. I thought it was topical, not typical. Topical to have you in here, just given some of the current
For
issues in the
sure.
political realm right now. But
Yeah.
there's absolutely always more issues to come, and
Of
more
course.
issues, more issues to get into.
Well,
Uh,
hey. No,
say,
we've
let's
had a great talk, and I think I'm sure there's people out there that are going to listen to it, and they're going to take away a lot from what we both been talking about. So it's always
yeah. Oh
important
yeah,
thing.
taxes and benefits always suck.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's a fun thing when you're not 18 yet. The amount of taxes they take off, if anything, is small. Um, Again, it's a tax like taxes are optional under the age of 18. Back when I was working, when I was 18, or well, when I was under 18. I don't know if that's still the law to this day. I do know though that when you file your taxes as an under 18-year-old, the calculations are very generous in your favor.
Hmm.
I know that I again I don't know if it's like based on income or if it's age and income or if there's one or the other or a combination. I haven't looked. I'm not going to be a tax lawyer, and I definitely have no interest in looking at the tax code at the moment. But well, taxation is also theft. But um, yeah, under the age of 18, I do believe that you can have the option to not have taxes deducted, but you still have to file.
hmm
And I have no idea how that works when your parents are filing or not filing or whatever. Um, I know there was actually a point when I was 15 working that first job that I was actually making more money than my mother was.
Oh wow.
She worked minimum wage at a doing waitressing, and in my little town that I grew up in, the tips weren't always that great. Sometimes they were good, but they weren't that great always.
Mm,
But there was certainly I think there was a couple of months in there where I actually out earned her. Where is all that money today? I actually used it to buy things for the family. Like
nice.
I bought a new TV for the family
That's
because
awesome.
that was the kind of person I was back then. I would still think I'm that person now, but I've gotten a lot less generous with my money because I have a lot less money to be generous with.
Don't we
In,
all? Holy cow.
Inflation sucks, Crumb.
It really does.
So,
It really.
anyways, Crumb, please plug your stuff. Thank you so much for coming on today.
I appreciate you inviting me on. It was great to talk, and it's again like always a pleasure. I'd come back anytime. If y'all want to find me, I'll be on Twitch at twitch.tv/Crumbrion and on Twitter at DarksideEvie. So two different words, Darkside Evie. But yeah, you can find all my hijinks there. There's going to be something coming up in July that I think I want to get your opinion on. I think you'd be very interested in watching the outcome of this particular court case that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. So
July. Okay, what's why am I because I know I covered a court case earlier where they ruled that groomer is a slur word. Is it the appeal for that?
no, no, this is something I've been kind of involved with for the past couple of years, keeping an eye on and exposing. And so there's a particular individual that's going to be in Germany that's going to be in court for some very nefarious things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on the proceedings for that. So I think you
Oh,
might find it interesting too. There's
I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. But
yeah, there is a Pokemon Twitch extension that the person owns, and he's going to be brought in front of a lifetime of bad decisions. So
wait, is that the PCG stuff?
yes, it certainly is.
Oh my goodness. You know what? Hey guys, Google Pokemon PCG or just hit up Crumb's Discord.
Yeah, I think I still have it highlighted, all the stuff in there for that. So if you
Oh man,
exclamation mark PCG.
that is the rabbit hole to end all rabbit holes. Oh my, like you know what you know when I heard you talk about PCG on your Twitch channel, there was a moment where I was like, like that all can't be true. I mean, there's got to be maybe there's a misunderstanding, or maybe there's a
Oh,
little bit of
lost.
hyperbole in there.
The
And
stuff that I
then
have
I see the
yet
receipts, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh shit.
The stuff that I have yet to talk about because it is currently in front of the court, will literally blow your socks off.
Well, and you always bring receipts too. I've known
Oh,
you
yes.
long enough that when you say something, you have receipts.
Oh, yes. There's a
So if you're
reason.
not saying it, uh,
There is a reason. I have no obligation to stay silent, but I am because of the severity of the situation. So
yeah, especially when the stakes are that high, you got to make sure you get
yeah,
it right.
exactly. So
You don't want to do what happened to Vic,
no,
right?
exactly. You
Don't
don't
be a
want to
Matt
give them
Hullum.
an out. You don't want to give them an out for sure in this situation.
Don't be a Matt Hullum and say like, "Oh, I'm going to take, I'm going to take what they say as 100% gospel without ever doing any independent fact checking of
Yeah,
my own."
exactly. So, but no, July is the date that's all going to start coming out in court. So, and
Oh
then
man,
I'll be able to talk about it. Believe me, I'll be able to talk about it then.
well, when you go live on your channel about it, I'll probably tune in. I might pass out. Don't hold it against me. The law school's hell,
Oh, no worries. But
and
thank you
law
again.
practice is hell too. So in July, I'll
Oh,
probably be working my
absolutely.
first like law job this summer. I'm hoping so, anyways.
Yeah.
Actually, I saw that I got a text from someone
Hey,
um,
popular.
that is one of my contacts for possible employment in the upcoming Saskatchewan provincial election. And I'm like,
Hey.
I'm not, I'm not even. What is a Calgarian gonna do in the Saskatchewan provincial election? You tell me. But again, like this is what other people say about me. I'm one of maybe 4 people in Alberta qualified to do the work that I do when it comes to political data analytics.
Hmm.
I've said this on Nick Ricada's channel, right? What I do and what I get paid to do, it's not because, I blew some person or I know this guy.
Of
It's
course.
because I'm good at it. What I say tends to be right.
Absolutely. That's a
And
good place to be.
and again, that's not my words. Those are not my words at all. That's what other people said about me. And that's why like I do get to this day texts from, heavy hitting political people like in Canada who are like, "Hey, I just want to see like how much would it cost me to bring you into my team?" I always have an answer ready to go. I always have
There
an
you
answer
go.
ready to go, and this guy seems to be a little bit more than just interested. So I
Oh,
gotta
there you
see
go.
what that text was about.
Fingers crossed. Good luck.
Yeah, so it's either that or a law job. I can't really. I know who that is, and I don't know. I'm like not sold that that's a compliment. But no,
Oh
we
my
actually
goodness.
have some great radio personality. One of them is the premier of Alberta, Daniel Smith.
That's awesome.
She was a great radio personality. Um, and when it comes like Canada's Alex Jones, do you know who I'm talking about when I say Canada's Alex Jones?
Not off the top of my head.
Ezra Levant.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
label fits now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
We've got some, and he's done American media before. I can almost I'm almost 100% sure he was on the Tucker Carlson show before Tucker got thrown off.
Hmm.
Fox. Um, some American audience members might know the name, but anyways, Canadian Alex Jones is like 100% more conspiratorial and 100% less on steroids.
Alex Jones is a national treasure. That man.
He is. I mean, they have to put his body in the time capsule.
Seriously, yeah.
You know, when he has a heart, when his heart finally explodes.
Just freeze him in carbonite.
Yeah, but I again, how can someone go 100% all the time like that? Right? Like he
He's
doesn't have an
got
off
it.
day where he's like, "Oh, I'm a little bit low energy today, you know, I'm
No,
under the weather. I have a touch of the flu, so I'm not going to be as crazy on the microphone today."
no. He is all gas, no brakes.
Yeah, there you go. All right. I will see you out from here. Thank you so much. Did we miss
Thank
anything?
you. No, I
You
think we
plugged your
hit.
stuff.
I think we hit what we wanted to there. Got the shout outs.
All right. Well, I'll kill the stream. I was going to hang out for a second just for a quick
Yeah, for
debrief,
sure.
but
Yeah.
we'll kill the stream right now. Replay crew, to my replay crew friends out there. Hey, make sure you check that you're subscribed to the channel. Every little bit helps, you know, a small upcoming channel. This is what I'd love to do. Maybe not as a job or as a career. This is stuff I love talking about. I would do it for free. I am doing it for free. Let's be honest. I'm not monetized, so I am doing it for free. Um, I love doing this stuff. And so let me know what topics you want me to hit. Did you enjoy the conversation? Did I leave something out? Did I get a fact wrong? Please fact check me. I love being fact checked, especially by the people who do not agree with me politically. They're the best fact checkers.
Absolutely.
So until next time, everyone, remember, stay frosty.